Chapter 21. Sillin raised his head. The person with the hoverboard on his left and the backpack on his right seemed to be reading Seven Lights Weekly, but the little boy was following the voice. A white-haired old man was shouting at Sillin from a chair not far away, while holding a pile of parts in his hands. Seeing Sillin looking over, the old man pointed at the side of Sillin's chair. "Little boy, do me a favor and pass it over." The old man was panting a little as he spoke. He was probably tired. Sillin picked up the parts that had rolled to the side of the chair, stood up, and passed them to the old man. "Thanks, little boy." "Sir, I'm almost 18. "Oh, you're almost 18, little boy. This old man is 130 years old." Sillin, "Never mind. So be it, little boy." After the old man received the parts, he began to assemble the parts in his hands and assembled every interface accordingly. The assembly of many interfaces required a lot of technical content. An unskilled person would need to spend at least 10 minutes to connect a single connection, but this old man had done it in almost a second. It looked like he had a lot of skill in this line of work. Every finger was fully performing its function. Fulcrum, balance, compression. Although the old man was panting a little earlier, his hands were very steady. These parts in his hands were like fragmented pieces of art that were slowly assembled into a dazzling work of art. The old man assembled very seriously, and Sillin also watched very seriously. He could learn a lot of assembly skills by observing the old man's movements. Sillin had never seen a person who could fully utilize their fingers to this extent. In fact, every gap between their fingers was fully utilized. The parts jumped on their fingers and were assembled onto the main body in the next moment. Other than the skill of his fingers, Sillin discovered that the old man was also very experienced in judging parts. He only needed to look at the interfaces on the main body, then sweep his gaze across the pile of parts placed on his knees, and he would be able to pick out the one he needed without error. While the old man was assembling, a three-dimensional image also appeared in Sillin's mind. After a part was assembled, the next part that was assembled at the interface had already taken shape in his mind. Then, Sillin's gaze and the old man's finger movements landed on the correct part almost at the same time. 10 minutes later, a 15-centimeter tall robot was completed. Sillin had watched the assembly process from beginning to end. He knew very well just how complicated the circuit connections and the assembly of chip parts were inside this robot. Even some of the engineers he had met on planet Brown Earth would need at least half a day to complete the assembly of this robot. Moreover, the inspection's qualification had yet to be verified. However, the old man had completed the final product in 10 minutes, and the inspection showed that it was absolutely excellent. After the old man finished assembling the parts, he realized that the little doll who had helped him pick up the parts was watching from the side. His eyes flashed with interest. "Little doll, are you interested?" Sillin looked at the little robot that was dancing smoothly in the old man's hand and answered, "No." After that, he turned around and prepared to return to his original seat. "Hey, kid, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Stay here and chat with this old man. It's boring to wait here alone. But I see you're enjoying yourself." Sillin cursed in his heart. "Wait for me to bring the bag and hoverboard over. Just leave it there. No one will take it. Come here." The old man was afraid that Sillin would run away. He moved his butt and patted the empty seat next to him, signaling Sillin to sit down. Sillin had no choice but to sit down after looking at the bag and hoverboard. "Little doll, did you see how I assembled the parts just now?" Sillin nodded. "Did you see it clearly? There are a few parts that I don't understand." "Which parts?" Sillin pointed out his doubts. Although he had completely memorized the movements of the old man assembling the parts, there were a few principles that he did not understand. The old man was very surprised by the few questions that Sillin asked. If one did not have a certain understanding of the assembly of this model of robot, one would not be able to ask such questions. It seemed that this young man had learned it before. However, the old man did not show it on his face. He answered Sillin's questions one by one. The old man spoke simply and straightforwardly. He did not use a lot of difficult professional jargon like some ostentatious teachers to flaunt their erudition. The circuit is the nervous system of the robot. It takes a lot of effort to install this nervous system accurately. This old man has a lot of experience, and practice makes perfect. After talking about the circuit connection, the old man pointed to several parts of the robot. These things seem simple, but it takes a lot of effort to manufacture them. For example, you young people like to play with guns. Some of you who are well off often customize gun barrels and firearms, but you don't pay attention to the manufacturing process. Let's not talk about the design. That's a tiring job. After that, you have to choose the materials, expand the gun barrel, cut the rifling. A series of processes need to be precise. The more the old man spoke, the more energized he became. In fact, he even gave a few popular gun models as examples and criticized them to the point of no return. Among them were the DKC series multi-purpose titanium gun that was rather popular among youngsters and the Slaughter Elf that Cylin had seen before. But I heard that those idiots from the Duance family have come up with a Carnage Elf 2 these past few days. I haven't seen the specifics, but I hope it won't have a fatal flaw like the Carnage Elf. The old man's spittle flew everywhere as he spoke. His face was flushed. Although he did not say anything, he saw the approval in Cylin's eyes. The more the old man criticized, the more enthusiastic he became. However, Cylin was sweating in his heart. Those idiots from the Duance family. He was now under the Duance family's name. The beep sounded. The train had arrived. The people waiting at the platform all stood up, and the people in the waiting room also came out one after another. Old man, let me send you on the train first. Cylin lifted the 2 bags of parts and prepared to help the old man carry the 2 bags of parts onto the train before getting off to grab his backpack and hoverboard. The weight of these 2 bags of parts was nothing to Cylin, but the old man was old, and it took a lot of effort to carry them. Moreover, Cylin quite admired the old man's research spirit. When it came to something related to his research, he would ignore it no matter how tired his body was. You're not bad, kid. What's your name? Who's your mechanical engineering grand instructor? I'll talk to your grand instructor later and have him give you more credits and GPA. The old man asked while walking towards the train door. Although in principle, a student's credits and GPA were given strictly according to the student's usual grades, in reality, the final credits and GPA given were also made up of many factors. If someone from above recommended a student, then the substitute instructor would give them more credits. There were many instructors for every type of course, but there would never be more than 5 grand instructors. The old man called him a grand instructor the moment he opened his mouth. It looked like the old man's status in Seven Lights was pretty high. However, didn't people of that level usually have a special car? Then I really have to thank you. But I'm a new student in Seven Lights, and I haven't registered yet. As for who the instructor is, I have even less of a clue. You're specially recruited? No, my family paid to throw me in to continue my education. The old man was truly surprised. He paused for a moment and said, You have the qualifications to be specially recruited. The old man's words were very certain. He didn't even use the usual prefixes like I think or I think. It was straight up a very imposing statement. If I say you have it, then you have it. This was probably related to the old man's identity, and he was used to speaking like this, as if very dissatisfied that a student like Cylin was not specially recruited. The old man snorted, Name. Cylin smiled and placed the 2 bags of parts next to the old man's seat. I'm called Buzz. Buzz. The sound of a speeding car resounded. There were 2 open-top flying cars. One was crimson red and the other bright yellow. When they flew past the station, the owner of the red car reached out and scooped Cylin's backpack away. This was truly an evil act under the watchful eyes of the public. But the people at the station seemed to be used to it and did not have much of a reaction. It was obvious that the old man had seen it too. His eyes were as round as saucers. Earlier, he had told Cylin that no one would take it. You should go first. Once he was done, Cylin quickly jumped out of the car, picked up the hoverboard that was not taken away, activated it, and chased after the old man on it. Sigh, it's fine if there's nothing important, but isn't it futile to chase after a flying car with a hoverboard? Someone commented, Yeah, it's not like such a thing is rare. The people driving the flying cars are just bored out of their minds. It's not like they lack money, and they're purely looking for fun and irritating people. Even if they're caught by the police, they'll just be fined, compensated, and settled privately. That's why these people aren't afraid. Listening to the discussion around him, The old man was silent for 2 seconds. Then, he raised his hand and clicked on his communicator. He searched for a number on the pop-up interface, confirmed it, and dialed it. Chapter 22. At Seven Lights University's training base, inside the department head's office of the training division's office building, a middle-aged man and a muscular young man around 17 or 18 years old were conversing in front of a tea table. "Knight, what have you learned in the past 2 days at Seven Lights?" The middle-aged man asked the young man sitting in front of him with the smile of an elder looking at a junior. Although the middle-aged man was just sitting there, his every movement exuded the temperament of a soldier. The young man called Knight looked slightly impatient, but he was talking to an elder after all, so his tone did not go overboard. In short, boring, utterly boring. Seven Lights isn't a military academy after all. It's impossible for the students to come into contact with guns and armor often, and even if they did, there wouldn't be a large-scale firepower training simulation. However, Seven Lights' online training platform is pretty good. The middle-aged man expressed that there were some things that he couldn't help even if he wanted to. But those aren't real. Facing a real gun muzzle and a simulated gun muzzle is completely different. Also, the people here are utterly lacking in terms of physical fitness. Bates' face was full of disdain. He had fought a few rounds with the senior students for the past 2 days, and although a few of them were barely passable, they were barely passable. Knight didn't really take them seriously. If he wanted to improve his combat strength, he could only train with the people in the training division. A portion of the people in the training division and police division were transferred over from the Galactic Army. Soldiers were different from academies, and the killing intent they exuded during battle excited Knight. This isn't a military academy after all. The middle-aged man had said this countless times in the past 2 days, and he felt very helpless. "Why don't you apologize to your dad and arrange to go to a military academy at Sector C right now? You haven't registered here anyway." "Impossible. I'd rather be bored here until I graduate than apologize. Plus, I'm not in the wrong at all. Those bastards deserve a beating. They deserve a beating." A wave of hostility rose from Knight's body at the mention of this matter. "Didn't I just beat up a bunch of noisy, pretentious rich kids? I'll beat them all the same the next time I see them." The middle-aged man smiled wryly. The father and son duo were so alike that their stubbornness was hard to reverse once it was triggered. Just as he was about to say something, his communicator suddenly rang. He gestured to Knight to wait for a moment and looked. He didn't recognize the number, and it wasn't even a video call, just a voice call. Pondering who it was, Juanil picked up the communicator and said with the imposing manner of the training division director, "I'm Juanil." Little Nail, the moment he heard the voice, Juanil shot up from his chair and reflexively brought his feet together in a standard military stance. Then, he answered with a forceful voice, "Yes." Knight was so shocked that he nearly fell off his chair. His mouth was agape as he stared at the man who was acting like an elder just a moment ago. Now he was standing ramrod straight, listening to the admonishment of the person on the other end of the communicator. "Yes. Okay, don't worry. I will immediately inform the security department to take action." "Okay, I know. Please don't worry." "Okay, be careful." It was only after the communication ended that Juanil's tense body relaxed a little. His expression was bitter, and it was much deeper than when he was talking to Knight just now. Also, why did Old Master Mo change his number again? Speaking of which, Old Master Mo changed his number more and more frequently to prevent people from bothering him. It was probably because the new students had arrived and there were more people asking to visit him. "Uncle Hua, what happened?" "We'll talk later." Juanil didn't have the time to explain too much tonight. He turned around and connected to the security team. The call was quickly connected. Nail, why are you looking for me at this time? Are you bored and looking for practice?" The other side teased. Juanil ignored the other's teasing and said seriously, "Gerard, I just received a report that there was a robbery at the global train station in the trade zone. 2 flying cars stole the backpack of a waiting student." On the other side, Gerard couldn't help but facepalm when he heard this. They couldn't be bothered to care about such things. They were all small squabbles between students, and it was almost no big deal. Moreover, it was just a backpack that they stole. It wasn't anything important. Plus, those rich kids who raced their cars didn't lack money at all. But someone who could get the public security squad to mobilize troops through Juanil obviously had some weight to his name. Gerard's biggest annoyance was that he would be pissed if the public security squad was dragged into the squabbles between the children of a few great families. Nail, tell me, who made the report? Your old boss, General Mo's father, Seven Lights vice headmaster, old Mo. Before Juanil could finish, Gerard said righteously, to commit such a despicable act as a flying car robbery in broad daylight. This is outrageous. Juanil. When Gerard was done, he turned around and roared at his subordinates who were sparring outside the window. Bastards, get into formation and move out. Whoever is one step slower will be stripped and thrown to run naked around the city. After he was done shouting, he said to the communicator, Nail, tell old Amon not to worry. We will immediately move out and take care of those two itching brats. After turning off the communicator, Juanil pressed the control button on his hand. A screen drooped down, and after he had inputted the coordinates, a few images appeared. They were images taken from the top, the side, and the front-facing Sillin and the two flying cars. Knight had also come over curiously to take a look. There was an uninhabited area between the trade zone and the nightless city of the entertainment zone. The three red, yellow, and blue cars that flew past the boundless green forest on the ground stirred up a wave of green. Fuck, that kid actually chased us for so long on that shitty hoverboard. What's in his bag? The person in the bright yellow flying car complained. Other than a newspaper, a tablet, and some clothes, it's all food. The clothes look like they're made of a pretty valuable material, but there's nothing else of value. The person in the crimson flying car rummaged through Sillin's bag and said, Fuck, he chased us for so long with just this. Another hothead. I wonder how many high-efficiency energy cells he used. The person attributed the reason why Sillin chased them for so long to the high-efficiency energy cells. That's right. TCH, he wants to chase after a flying car with a shitty hoverboard? It's useless even if he used 100 high-efficiency energy cells. That kid is a complete idiot. Ignore him and speed up. That kid won't last long anyway. Plus, that shitty hoverboard of his doesn't have much of a burden on the high-efficiency energy cells. Don't let it explode while chasing. Haha, that's interesting. Let's wait and see that kid's hoverboard explode. Oh, the duo roared arrogantly and continued to increase the speed of the car. Sillin narrowed his eyes and increased the force under his feet. He also adjusted his body to an angle with the least resistance, and an invisible aura around him broke through the air like a shuttle. He didn't have goggles, but this speed didn't affect Sillin's vision at all. Following the sound of the hoverboard breaking through the air, the current Sillin seemed to have merged with the hoverboard as he shot out like a blue homing bullet. He possessed both speed and agility. Sillin's brain calculated the opponent's speed, the amount of pedaling force he needed to use, the number of pedals he needed to use, and the endurance of the hoverboard. This hoverboard relied on energy to provide itself with maximum speed, so it couldn't catch up to the two flying cars in front of it. That was why Sillin reduced the amount of energy and used human pedaling instead. Inside the training division's office, Juanil and Knight were staring at the screen. This kid isn't simple at all. Juanil asked. He didn't use the manual rudder, but completely controlled it with his mind. It's obvious that his mind control is very strong from the way he nimbly dodged the obstacles. Not only that, he saved energy and used all the energy that was originally allocated to the manual rudder to maintain the hoverboard's flight. If he had started chasing with the hoverboard from the train station at the trade zone, the fact that he was able to chase this far without being shaken off by the flying car means that this guy's stamina is pretty good. From the distorted shockwaves when he stepped on the hoverboard, it could be seen that this guy is very strong. At this point, Knight's eyes were already revealing a strong desire to fight. Who is he? There was no way such a person was unknown. Juanil entered a series of passwords and coordinates on the other screen. Through the Seven Lights card's location and identification, he could confirm the cardholder's identity. Sillin Dewants? The Dewants families? On the other side, a special passenger flying car from the trade zone to the entertainment zone's nightless city was traveling in the air. A couple of students were bored as they stared at the endless green forest outside the window. Suddenly, a student who was looking outside the window opened his eyes wider and wider. "Holy shit, is that bro stepping on a hoverboard?" The people beside him looked outside the window. Two flying cars and the hoverboard that was hot on their heels appeared in everyone's sight, and they quickly overtook the passenger car. "Is that really a hoverboard and not a plane?" "Bullshit. Is there a plane that looks like a hoverboard?" "I think this is actually a hoverboard commercial, isn't it?" Someone else expressed his opinion. Someone looked around. "I don't see a film crew around. If it really is a hoverboard, then I'm going to buy one like this. I just don't know what brand it is." "It's fine. I recorded the scene just now." No matter what the people on the passenger car were discussing, Cillian's only wish right now was to take pictures of these two bag robbers and fish out a sum of compensation money. The hoverboard might just be scrapped after this flight. The two flying cars in front continued to accelerate, and Cillian also increased the force and frequency of his steps. The sound of the hoverboard breaking through the air could be heard clearly by everyone inside the passenger car. Before long, the three shadows of red, yellow, and blue disappeared from the passenger car's sight. Not good. The hoverboard is almost at its limit. Cillian's mind swiftly calculated the angle and success rate of his next move. The duo who were chatting inside the flying car suddenly heard a loud explosion behind them. "Ha! It exploded! It exploded! That kid's hoverboard exploded!" The person inside the red car had a look of wild joy on his face. He was just about to turn around and look at the kid's terrible state behind them when he suddenly heard a loud bang. His vision blurred, and the flying car crashed uncontrollably towards the ground. In the next moment, there was another bang. The other bright yellow flying car was kicked away while doing a difficult roll. Inside the training division's office, Juanil and Knight were both dumbfounded as they stared at the screen. Chapter 23. The two people inside the flying car did not understand what was going on, but Juanil and Knight saw everything clearly in front of the training division screen. The moment the hoverboard exploded, Cillian borrowed the impact produced by the explosion to charge towards the crimson flying car. He slapped the car's rear and used the force of the slap to swiftly kick the bright yellow flying car at the side. In the blink of an eye, one of the two flying cars was slapped down and the other was kicked away. Juanil and Knight were not shocked by whether or not Cillian had slapped down or kicked the two cars, but by how accurately Cillian had grasped the timing. Borrowing the momentum of the explosion caused by the hoverboard's overload would not succeed if he was a moment too early, and he would be hurt by the explosion shockwave if he was a moment too late. At the same time, Cillian was able to accurately lock onto the crimson flying car's next point of impact after he was launched. Then, he would borrow the force to kick the bright yellow flying car away. Knight pointed at Cillian, who had landed safely on the screen, and said, "How can a person like this be unknown?" Juanil did not answer Knight's question and sighed emotionally, as expected of the man under Elder Hiroshi's protection. But since when did the Duance family produce such a person? A person like this was obviously a battle-hardened veteran. There was no way he was the same as those tender newbies. Moreover, Juanil could see that the kid was quite decisive and did not hesitate in the slightest from this scene alone. Inside the vast green forest, after two loud crashes, Cillian slowly walked to the side of the crimson flying car. The car's body was already deformed, and some of its internal components were scattered everywhere. Some had even landed far away. The flying car's energy system was relatively safe, so it did not explode. Although the person inside the car was protected by the car's protective bag and was not seriously injured, he was obviously still in shock. His eyes were dull, his body was still trembling, and his teeth were chattering. Looking at the person, Cillian took out his backpack from inside the car and checked the contents inside. He curled his lips. He actually ate the snacks he bought. Ripping off the protective bag, Cillian grabbed the person's face and shook it. It was only then that the person slowly moved his focus to Cillian. His already pale face turned even paler as he said, shakily, Don't kill me. I'll return the backpack. How much money do you want? I'll pay you." He was truly afraid. He had never encountered something like this before. The moment the car was slapped down, His entire body seemed to be enveloped in despair. "You make it sound like I'm a robber." Sillin took out a tablet and wrote on it, then passed it to the person. "Because your evil deeds have caused me serious losses, so you have to pay me back. This is what you should do. Here, the details are all recorded here. A hoverboard costs 2,000 star coins, and the energy storage consumes 500 star coins. You ate 3 of my snacks, 5 star coins each, so 3 of them is 15 star coins. However, these 3 snacks are from the trade zone, so I can't go back there buy them now. So these 3 snacks will be 30 star coins, and there will be 10,000 star coins for mental damage. Of course, the most important thing is that this matter has also wasted my time. You know that time can't be bought with money, so I'll take a loss and count it as 10,000 star coins." Sillin said a lot of things, and finally concluded, "That's a total of 50,000 star coins. Is there a problem?" The person was no longer in the mood to think. He only shook his head and nodded. "All right, that's it. Leave your fingerprint." Sillin handed the tablet to the person. The person trembled as he pressed his fingerprint on the tablet. "Where's the card?" The person trembled as he took out his 7 lights card. "Yo, it's even orange. What year are you?" 2. It was at this moment the security team's alarm rang, and the person's eyes that were filled with terror suddenly lit up as if he had seen his savior. The security team had sent a motorcade. In the past, it was already good enough for the security team to send out a car when something like this happened. Today, it could be said that they were paying extra attention to this matter. Gerard was personally leading the team. On the way here, the surveillance on Gerard's car only showed 3 rapidly moving indicators. It was possible to tell which was the flying car and which was the hoverboard, because both hoverboards and flying cars had GPS signals and 7 lights. However, Gerard did not know what exactly happened, so when he saw the hoverboard's indicator disappear on the surveillance, his entire body turned cold. "Oh no, how am I going to explain this to Seremo?" Although the 2 flying cars had crashed, their bodies were not destroyed, and their GPS signals had not disappeared either. Therefore, what Gerard saw was the 2 cars' indicators moving strangely before coming to a stop. Gerard urged the security team to hurry over. However, when they saw the scene in person, the security team members were a little dumbfounded. Both flying cars had crashed. What on earth happened? Right now, the only person Gerard cared about was Sillin. Neil had already sent Sillin's information to Gerard, so the moment Gerard saw Sillin at the scene, he ran straight towards him. "Do you want Sillin, is it? I am the security team, Captain Gerard." Gerard wore a kind smile on his face. When he saw that Sillin was fine, Gerard's heart also relaxed. Sillin leaned against the car and looked at the passing Gerard. He was sure that he did not know this person, but before he could answer, he heard the person still sitting in the car scream, "Help!" While screaming, he pulled himself out of the flying car with great effort and ran straight towards Gerard, who was wearing the security team's logo. Gerard threw the running person to the team members behind him. He had no time to pay attention to this guy right now. "We have received a report of a flying car robbery at a train station in the trade zone. We need to understand the situation right now. Hello, Captain Gerard. I'm very grateful that everyone from the security team came to uphold justice, but we have reached an agreement to settle this privately." "That for the best," Gerard shouted in his heart. He did not want to get involved in the conflict between the children of great families. But when he thought of Seremo, Gerard still recorded the bag robber's demerit and deducted his credits and GPA. "Captain Gerard, do you have a card reader? I want to borrow it. I want to transfer it." "Transfer? I have one in my car." Gerard led Sillin over. When he saw Sillin swipe his card and transfer the money, and then very calmly return the card to the original owner, Gerard couldn't help but think that perhaps they really did come here for nothing. With Gerard's experience, he could naturally guess what had happened after seeing the scene. He couldn't help but think much more highly of Sillin. Before, he was still giving face to Seremo, but now he had to admit Sillin's ability. The person in the other bright yellow flying car was also brought over. His situation was similar to the one in the crimson flying car. He was trembling so much that he was almost carried over by the security team. After the main matters were settled, Gerard had his men deal with the aftermath of the scene, and he and a few team members drove Sillin and the other 2 away. However, Sillin got off the car at the edge of Nightless City. He still wanted to observe the situation in Nightless City. After Sillin got off the car, a security team member next to Gerard sighed. "Captain, that kid is actually a King Kong, isn't he? A hoverboard chasing a flying car?" It was truly unimaginable. And not just anyone could overturn two flying cars with just a hoverboard powered by a normal energy cell. Not even Gerard himself could guarantee it. At the same time, a video was released on Seven Lights' internal network, and the name Hoverboard Kid began to spread throughout Seven Lights. Chapter 24. There were a lot of people who knew of Hoverboy, but very few knew that Hoverboy was Sillin. This was because Sillin's figure was a little blurry in the video, and his face could not be seen clearly. When he was chasing after the flying car, the air around Sillin's body was compressed and distorted irregularly. Moreover, the clarity of the video recorded by the people on the passenger flying car was not high, and the distorted parts could not be restored in the future. For this reason, the person who recorded the video had even bought a more professional camera so that he would not regret it in the future. Sillin had seen the video by chance. Fortunately, he had changed his clothes when he arrived at Nightless City, and his original clothes were damaged due to the air friction while chasing after the flying car. Otherwise, even if he did not know the true face of Hoverboy, he would still be familiar with his clothes. After arriving at Nightless City, Sillin deeply felt the money-making ability of this enormous entertainment system. More than 80% of the people who came to Seven Lights, especially those who came from wealthy families, spent their money here. Tuition fees and whatnot were practically worthless in comparison. Amusement parks, bars, game halls, hotels, casinos. The madness of entertainment knew no day or night. In Nightless City, there were disputes at almost every moment, but the security team would not care too much. Seven Lights had a clear rule that as long as the matter was within a certain acceptable range, they could be allowed to cause as much trouble as they wanted. But once the limit was exceeded, Seven Lights' punishment would be very strict, and there were plenty of people who were expelled from school for causing too much trouble. Other than that, there were also related laws and regulations. Once they were enforced, the security team and the training division would be mobilized. Who were the security team and the training division? They were the people sent by the galactic military who had experienced life and death battles. Resistance? No way. Sillin walked around Nightless City for 2 days before continuing to his next stop. For the next 3 days, Sillin went to the training zone, the R&D zone, and other areas. However, those areas were more restricted, and Sillin did not have the authority to do so right now. Although he had only observed from the periphery, Sillin still deeply felt the uniqueness of these areas. On the last day of registration, Sillin took the train back to the school district. According to the original plan, there was still plenty of time for registration. The reason why Sillin only registered after he was done with his stroll was because he was only allowed to walk around the teaching area after registration and was not allowed to leave as he pleased. This was because after registration, all of the students' files in Seven Lights would be activated, and they would truly become Seven Lights official students. Seven Lights management was relatively stricter towards new students. This was the management method adopted by most of the schools in Sector B. Following the directions on the map, Sillin arrived at the reporting area. The first 2 days and the last day of the check-in period were the peak hours, but there was absolutely no one in the last hour of the check-in period. From afar, he could see that there weren't many students at the registration counter. There were only 2 staff members sitting there, shaking their arms. It seemed like they had a lot of work today and were exhausted. Those guys came to Seven Lights University so early and went to Nightless City to have fun. They only came back on the last day to register. "I'm so tired," a staff member complained. "It can't be helped. It's like this every year. If those young masters had registered a few days earlier, they would have rotted in the school district." A person lying on a chair answered, "There's still an hour left. There shouldn't be anyone left. We'll leave after a nap." "I'm afraid not. There's a kid in front of us." Looking at the slowly approaching Sillin, the duo's complexion turned a little ugly. They could not even hide their impatient expressions. After looking at Sillin's card, one of them pointed at a small device beside his hand, swiped the Seven Lights card on it. After the Seven Lights card was swiped, Silen's information appeared on the screen. The Duance family? A big family. Seeing Silen's information, the duo's attitude at the reporting area improved a lot. They forced a smile and passed Silen a tablet. Please fill in these pieces of information. There are also matters such as dormitory selection at the back. At this point, the staff member paused for a moment. I don't think there are any single dormitories left. There aren't any double dormitories either. I'm sorry, but I think you can only choose a quad dormitory. But quad dormitories are good as well. It's big, and in Seven Lights, the space in a dormitory has always been 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 less than 2 + 2 less than 4. Also, quad dormitories are all villas. The person explained the benefits of quad dormitories to Silen. In truth, Silen also understood that although quad dormitories had the largest space and were slightly more than 4 single dormitories combined, the extra space was just a yard. Many people did not care for it, but Silen was an exception. In Seven Lights' student dormitory area, the most expensive accommodation was a single villa, and the most affordable was actually a single apartment. However, these two types were obviously the most popular, and those who came a little late were not able to choose them. Quad dormitories had always been thought of as a dormitory filled with conflict and trouble. After all, there were plenty of people who did not like each other when squeezed into a single apartment. In Seven Lights, there were frequent incidents where the entire villa was destroyed due to conflict between roommates. The reason why it was called quad dormitory was because other than the space inside the dormitory, everyone had their own training room, lounge, bathroom, study, and so on. A single dormitory only had one set of these things, and a quad dormitory had 4 sets of everything except the yard, living room, and kitchen. Then I'll choose a quad villa. Although Silen's ideal choice was a single apartment, it didn't matter if there wasn't one. The living conditions here were much better than the place he used to live in. While Silen was filling in the form, another person walked in from the registration office's entrance. It was a familiar face. Silen, you're reporting in at this time, too. C.I. Jincheng closed the book in his hands and walked over with a smile. C.I. Jincheng's Seven Lights card was orange, meaning that he was specially recruited. The two staff immediately widened their smiles and enthusiastically introduced the necessary procedures to C.I. Jincheng. The reason they were so enthusiastic wasn't just because C.I. Jincheng was a specially recruited student. The most important reason was the information displayed on C.I. Jincheng's card. The surname C.I. was uncommon in the galaxy, and with C.I. Jincheng's qualification as a specially recruited student, the two staff immediately thought of that family, the academic titans, the C.I. family. There wasn't a single person in the academic world who didn't know of the C.I. family. The frequency of the C.I. family members appearing in the 2 top magazines, Glory and Code, was breathtaking. Moreover, the C.I. family's influence in the galaxy's military and politics couldn't be underestimated either. It was no wonder that the two were so enthusiastic. Logically speaking, according to the registration order, every dormitory should be filled up before they could arrange for another dormitory. However, Silen and C.I. Jincheng's background were right there, and the two knew each other. The staff might as well do them a favor and reopen a quad villa. There were already 3 people living in the previous villa anyway, so they had to reopen a new one sooner or later. While the two were filling in the form, the sound of speeding suddenly came. There was the sound of a flying car and the sound of a hoverboard. Screech, the ruby-like body drifted beautifully, and the luxurious flying car came to a stop. The roof opened, revealing a familiar face to Silen. Andryer along. At the same time the flying car stopped, the hoverboard also stopped in front of the door. A muscular young man jumped off the hoverboard, put it away, and walked in. The two entered at almost the same time. C.I. Jincheng's eyelids twitched when he saw them. These two. Chapter 25. When they saw the 2 people who had just entered the door, the smiles on the 2 employees' faces widened once more. However, it was different from the mentality they had when they were facing C.I. Jincheng. Right now, the 2 of them were trying their best to smile as sincerely and passionately as possible, but their backs were starting to sweat profusely. With their eyesight, it was only natural that they could tell that the ruby-encrusted flying car was not something an ordinary rich family could buy. And that hoverboard was a military hoverboard. A military hoverboard was not something a normal flying car could compare to. Moreover, there was only one place in Seven Lights University that had this kind of hoverboard, and that was the training division. The duo knew very well what kind of people in the training division were. To be able to obtain a military hoverboard from the training division, it was obvious that this kid on a hoverboard had a pretty good military background. Anyone with a military background was not easy to deal with. Yo, Boston Ivy, we meet again. What a coincidence. Lung let out a bright smile. He really did not expect to run into Sillin at this time. Although Lung was driving a super luxurious flying car, his outfit was still the same one Sillin saw at the trade zone. It looked really incongruous. What a coincidence. Sillin replied with a smile. Sillin did not dislike this person. In fact, he found him interesting. A distinguished background could not hide this person's ability. Perhaps many people did not notice, but Sillin was sure that Lung was definitely not weak. As for the young man on the hoverboard, he carried an untamed aura amidst his resoluteness. When he saw Sillin, his eyes flashed with a fighting spirit as strong as a star. Even though they were just bystanders, the two employees felt a sense of fear. This young man was none other than Knight, who had watched the entire process of Sillin slapping down the flying car with Neil at the training division. Sillin was puzzled when he saw Knight's gaze. Who the hell is this guy? He seems to know me. However, Sillin did not show any signs of backing down in the face of the threatening, fighting spirit in Knight's eyes. Knight and Lung's Seven Lights cards were the same as Sillin's red cards. After they swiped their cards on the machine, their information was displayed on the screen. Indrira Lung, Fiegler Knight. The two employees exchanged glances with each other as their little hearts trembled violently. They had been in Seven Lights for so many years, so of course they were familiar with some of the more sensitive surnames. Everyone knew that the Andrira family was so poor they only had money left. What was more important was that the surname Fiegler had suddenly appeared. Fiegler came from a military family. There were already quite a few generals with the surname Fiegler, and among the 8 great marshals of the Interstellar Alliance Army, one of them had the surname Fiegler. The two staff members carefully dealt with the two people in front of them, for fear of offending these two little devils. Although there were plenty of rich kids in Seven Lights, there really weren't many who had backgrounds like the ones in front of them. In comparison, Sillin's Duant's family background was much more low-key. Originally, the two employees were going to report to their superiors and request for a few more single villas, but Lung and Knight chose to stay in the same dormitory as Sillin and C.I. Jinsheng right away. This surprised the two staff members. It was rare for someone with such a deep background to choose the least popular 4-person room. With their background, as long as they persevered, it was not impossible for them to get a single villa. After the 4 of them were done with the procedures, Lung waved his hand. Let's go. Sit in my car, roommates. Our beautiful 4-person life has begun, 4-person mode. Following Lung's voice, his 1-seater flying car swiftly transformed. The body of the car was slightly elongated, and 3 seats appeared one after the other. Sillin did not hold back and jumped straight into the car. It would be a waste not to take a free ride. When C.I. Jinsheng saw Sillin jump in, he paused for a moment before jumping into the car as well. Knight picked up the hoverboard he had put away and jumped into Lung's car. Yo, bro, so you don't mind my car now? You were looking down on me when I offered you a ride before. Lung joked when he saw Knight jump into the car. When Lung drove his flying car over from the trade zone and was about to reach the school zone, he ran into Knight, who was coming over from the training zone on a hoverboard. Cut the bullshit. You didn't even get a seat at the time. It's obvious that you were just joking. Knight curled his lips. Lung smiled and said nothing. At the time, he really was just joking. Even if Knight wanted to hitch a ride, Lung would not have paid him any attention. However, they were all in the same dorm now. In the old man's words, they were one of us. Of course, he had to treat his own people better. It was only after the flying car had flown far away and disappeared out of sight that the two staff members finally slumped down on their chairs. Holy shit, so many people signed up today. I didn't think that the finale would show up at the last hour. Yeah, who would have thought that 4 big shots would show up at the very beginning? Especially Knight. Sigh. Tell me, he has such a deep military background. Why did he come to Seven Lights instead of going to a military academy at Sector C? It doesn't seem like the Fiegler family style. What's wrong with that? The children of those big families have weird tempers. Maybe they want to change. Look at the Andryra family. Which one of them isn't a weirdo? That's true. Dorm room number 13 in Sector 6. This is probably the dorm for this term's new students. No, maybe even the entire Seven Lights University right now. Silent Quartet's dorm was number 13 in Sector 6. Sector 6 was a private villa area, and 13 was the house number. The number displayed in the recording system was 0613. After the number 0613 was keyed into the flying car, a clear navigation appeared. It didn't take long for the quartet to arrive at their assigned dorm. The first floor of the dorm took up at least 500 square meters of space. The dorm had 3 floors, and the first floor was the largest. The second and third floors were about the same in size, and excluding the courtyard, the 3 floors added up to at least 1,200 square meters. The wide courtyard was paved with grass, and above the fence was a light screen that reached straight into the sky. However, those who were not part of this dorm were not allowed to enter. Forcible entry would trigger an alarm and rebound. The target of the light screen was a Seven Lights card. While they were going through the procedures at the registration center, the quartet's identity information had already been entered into the dorm management system. The light screen in the courtyard opened up after sensing their Seven Lights cards, and a flying car flew straight into the courtyard. Lung sighed the moment he saw the dorm. It's so fucking small. Silent. Although C.I., Jincheng, and Knight did not say anything, it was obvious from their expressions that they had the same thoughts as Lung. Silin sighed in his heart. Fine, I'm a poor man. I won't compare myself to them. The keys to the dorm were all Seven Lights cards. As for the locks of each room, they would have to be set up separately. There was a setup system in every bedroom, and it was used to set the locks of their own bedroom, study, training room, and so on. The 4 training rooms, the living room, and the kitchen were all here. To Silin's surprise, other than the first floor, which had a fixed layout, the second and third floor could be moved according to one's preferences. Just like toy blocks, they could move and assemble according to one's preferences. Therefore, after a series of adjustments, there was no longer a clear boundary between the second and third floor. There was only the first floor above and the first floor below. After they were assigned their respective bedrooms, study, and so on, Lung shouted, "Let's go eat first. I'm starving to death, and I don't have the energy to tidy up the rest." Bullshit, did you tidy up? What's with those 2 home robots? All you did was adjust the distribution of space a little, but it was true that it was almost time for dinner. Never mind. I'll tidy up the rest after dinner. Should we order takeout or eat there? Silin asked. The Seven Lights handbook mentioned that the cafeteria had takeout, and many students had ordered takeout instead of going to the cafeteria. Of course, we're going to the cafeteria on our first day, and we can also see the beauties of Seven Lights. They're pretty good quality, you know. Lung smiled cheekily. The dorm area was divided into 7 sections. Section 1 and 2 were single villas, Section 3 and 4 were double villas, Section 5 and 6 were quadruple villas, and Section 7 was single apartments. These 7 sections formed a ring, and the center of the ring was the cafeteria, convenience store, hospital, coffee shop, and so on. The cafeteria was in the shape of a heptagonal star, and every corner was facing a dorm area. When Silin's quartet arrived at the cafeteria, they first swiped their cards and reserved a seat. It was fine as long as they could arrive within 30 minutes. If the person who swiped their card did not arrive within 30 minutes, then the seat would automatically be canceled and become unoccupied. After the quartet had reserved their seats, they went their separate ways to choose their dishes. After all, their tastes were different. But just as Silin was choosing his dishes, a shout suddenly came from behind him. Silin, Chapter 26. The owner of the voice was none other than Alan, whom Silin had met on the transport. Alan had originally come down from the passageway at the side to pick people up, but he didn't expect to see Silin, who was about to pick his dishes. What a coincidence, Alan. Sillin waved the tray in his hand and greeted Alan. Looking at the empty tray in Sillin's hand, Alan hurriedly said, "Sillin, it just so happens that you haven't picked your dishes yet. Come, let's go upstairs. It's my treat today. I wanted to tell you a long time ago, but I don't have your number. It just so happens that I ran into you here." While saying that, Alan grabbed Sillin's arm and dragged him upstairs, as if he was afraid that Sillin would refuse. Ever since he saw Sillin and Kong Man's discussion on the transport, and that complicated formula on the writing board, Alan had greatly admired this peer of his. Alan was also very enthusiastic towards those who were truly talented and knowledgeable. Never bully the old. This was the ideology his old man had instilled in him. Don't be in such a hurry. I came here with my roommates. I can't just leave without saying a word, can I? Sillin put down the tray and said, Roommates? Sillin, how many rooms is your accommodation? Alan had always thought that Sillin would choose a single villa given his conditions, but he didn't expect that to not be the case. I just registered today, so there's only a 4-person villa left. Oh, I understand. I also registered 3 days ago just to grab a single villa, but I still didn't make it in time. I can only choose a double villa. Alan made a regretful expression. The reason I'm treating today is so that I can get to know my roommates and the people in the surrounding accommodation, and also a couple of people I got to know after coming here. All right, I've also invited Pride. As for Kong Man, he seems to be a bit busy and can't come. Alan could be said to have put in a lot of effort to invite Pride, and he lost count of how many good words he had said. At the same time, Alan also felt it was a bit of a pity. He was going to invite this term's twin stars of 7 lights to take a photo together, but he didn't expect Kong Man to reject the invitation with the excuse that he didn't have time. Sillin, contact your other 3 roommates. It's my treat. Let's go together. The more the merrier. We're all freshmen this year, so let's get to know each other. By the way, there are a few beauties coming today. Don't miss them. The 4 of them had exchange numbers when they were on Lung's flying car earlier, so Sillin immediately dug out all 3 of their numbers and dialed them at the same time. After he told them about Alan's treat. Other than Lung, who was more straightforward, C.I., Jinsheng, and Knight were a little reluctant, but they still agreed to it in the end. C.I., Jinsheng, and Knight had agreed, mainly because of Sillin. Otherwise, with C.I. Jinsheng's personality, he wouldn't like that kind of absolutely chaotic atmosphere. Knight was also disdainful of communicating with those pretentious bastards who didn't know shit. It was already good enough that he didn't greet them with a punch. While Sillin was communicating with the trio, Alan ran to the entrance and looked around for a moment as if he was waiting for someone. Not long later, he returned with 3 beautiful girls and said something to them that caused the 3 beauties to laugh so hard that they shook like flowers. Their watery eyes added an extra layer of charm to them, and the students who were holding their trays around them stared straight at them. They didn't even realize that the dishes on their trays had been taken away. 3 beauties, allow me to introduce myself. This is my friend Sillin, and these 3 are... Alan, didn't you say that everyone has been waiting for a long time? One of the girls cut in before Alan could introduce himself. That's right, Alan. Hurry up and bring us up. The other girl flicked her hair and glanced sideways at Alan. Although Sillin looked good and had a good temperament, there were plenty of people like him in 7 Lights. Therefore, they really didn't have much interest in Sillin at all. Moreover, didn't the big shots usually go upstairs to a private room to eat? Seeing Alan's hesitation, Sillin smiled. It's fine, Alan. Bring them up first. Then, Sillin, wait for your roommates to arrive and go up together. The Freedom Hall is on the 2nd floor. I'll come and pick you up after I've sent them up. The moment they heard that Sillin actually had roommates, and not just one at that, the 3 girls lost even the slightest interest in Sillin. A person who lived in a 4-person room was not qualified to enter their eyes. Sillin didn't care about the 3 girls' gazes at all. He leaned against the side of the passage and waited for them. If it wasn't for Knight's words today, perhaps they wouldn't have chosen the dishes themselves and ordered the robots instead. Every time he recalled C.I. Jinsheng and Lung's expressions when they heard Knight's words, Sillin wanted to laugh. On the way to the cafeteria, Knight shared a little of his past experience. In fact, he had always ordered the robots to deliver his food before he entered the intermediate education school. However, There was one time when he saw a couple of mischievous fellows shoving dandruff into the separated plates. When the robots came to carry the plates, they would only scan the name of the dish, the presence of other living creatures, the presence of poisonous substances, and so on. Since then, Knight had always personally carried the plates, and it was obvious that CI, Jincheng, and Lung had always let the robots carry their food. At the time, both CI, Jincheng, and Lung felt nauseous. When they arrived at the cafeteria and saw that there were indeed a lot of people who personally carried the plates, the two became even more certain. It looked like a lot of people had similar experiences. Therefore, they decided to try their best to personally carry the plates in the future. Or they could just get a plate-carrying robot and set up a few more scanning procedures. Not long after Lon went up, CI, Jincheng, and the other two came over one after another. It looked like the experience of personally carrying the plates wasn't that great. Silin, where's your friend? Lung looked left and right, but didn't see anyone else. He brought the three beauties upstairs. Silin pointed upstairs. Oh, beauties! But Silin, tell me first, is your relationship with that friend of yours close? Silin briefly explained what happened on the transport plane to him. So you guys aren't that close, huh? But why was that kid so enthusiastic? Chev Allen? Chev? Oh, I remember now. The family that founded Star of Tomorrow and Prospect. Not bad. These two electronic publications both have more than 60 contribution points. Lung was obviously more familiar with these things, but judging from his tone, the Chev family was only not bad to Lung. Speaking of Star of Tomorrow, both CI, Jincheng, and Knight knew about it because they had both appeared on that publication before. So, all three of you have appeared on that electronic publication? Silin said. Appearing on an electronic publication with 60 contribution points wasn't something that could be done with money and background alone. The most important thing was real talent. Just like Kongman, who had an ordinary background, he was able to obtain the title of Double Star, like pride, completely through his own talent and ability. Hearing Silin's words, Knight snorted. You can appear on those publications if you want, but don't think that you can hide from other people's eyes just because you hide. We'll practice tomorrow. Indeed, a hoverboard kid who can chase after two flying cars with just a normal hoverboard and not get left behind. We have high hopes for you. Lung winked. Judging from CI Jincheng's calm expression, he obviously knew that hoverboard kid was Silin. You guys know all about it. Silin scratched his head. That's not all I know. Not just anyone can overturn two flying cars with a lousy hoverboard. That's why we need to practice properly before school starts. It sure isn't easy to find a good opponent in Seven Lights. The moment this was mentioned, Knight became eager again. The fighting spirit in his eyes instantly rose. All right, let's find a place to practice tomorrow. Of course, Silin wouldn't turn down a chance to practice. Don't tell me there's more to this hoverboard kid. Quick, tell us, Knight. Lung immediately moved closer. While they were going upstairs, Knight summarized the situation in a single sentence. It was simple and clear. Then, Lung's eyes lit up with amazement. Silin, go endorse the hoverboard my family sells. You'll get great treatment. Andraira's family did have a hoverboard manufacturing factory, and the brand was pretty famous too. Every hoverboard was priced at 10,000 galactic credits. Silin smiled without saying a word. After reporting Freedom Hall, a little flying robot brought the four over. They didn't take more than a few steps before they saw Alan coming from the corner. Hey, Silin, I was just about to go down and pick you up. Alan's voice came to an abrupt halt. His eyes widened because he saw the three people beside Silin clearly. Chapter 27. A lot of people may have heard of the names Andraira Lung, CI, Jincheng, and Fiegler Knight, but not many actually knew them. Alan's family had founded two League of Stars electronic magazines, so the faces of many famous people were deeply engraved in Alan's mind. That was why Alan recognized the trio beside Silin the moment he saw them. For a time, he didn't know how to react. He hadn't received any news that these three would come to Seven Lights University, and Alan had always thought that the brightest stars of this term were the twin stars of Seven Lights, Kongman and Pride. But today, Alan was truly stunned. When the trio looked at him at the same time, Alan suddenly felt nervous. Alan, who had always been friendly with everyone, actually felt nervous at that moment. Back then, Alan's father had pointed at the trio on Stars of Tomorrow in private and told Alan that these three would definitely stand at the top of the business, military, and academic worlds in the future. Alan didn't know why his father would give the trio such high praise. He hadn't said anything like this even when the twin stars of Seven Lights appeared, but Alan absolutely believed in his father's judgment. Fortunately, Alan was experienced and quickly adjusted his mentality. Cylin, these three are your roommates? It's an honor to meet you, Alan roared in his heart. Holy shit, Cylin's roommates are these three big shots. You know all of them? Then I won't introduce them. Yes. It is my honor to have you all here. Alan led the way at the front, while thinking that he would have to change his plans later. He would add some high-end dishes later and satisfy these people no matter what. But reality didn't go as Alan wished. When he approached the entrance of Carefree Hall, he heard a group of people talking and laughing inside. Who was that Alan kid going down to pick up? A slightly arrogant and impatient voice asked. I know that kid. I met him on the transport. Cylin had heard this voice on the transport before. What followed was a giggle filled with thick disdain. He's just a guy who lives in a quadruple room and eats at a common restaurant. This was one of the three girls. Then came another wave of laughter. There were all kinds of comments. Alan's vision darkened, and he nearly fell head first. Holy shit, I shouldn't have invited them. Also, why didn't he close the door? If you want to say bad things about them, you should at least say it behind closed doors. Bah, even if the door is closed, you can't say it. It was clear that Serene and the other three had heard every word of their conversation. Before Cylin could say anything, Lung had already started shouting, Yo, it looks like someone doesn't welcome us. It looks like everyone here is a big shot. Lung didn't care about Alan's face at all. He said whatever he wanted to say. Alan didn't even have the time to cry now. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to appease them. Among the few people who were still laughing, a young man stood up as if his buttocks were on fire. His face was red as he stammered. Young Master Long. This person had only seen Lung once when he followed his old man to negotiate. Even his old man had to pay attention to his words and actions in front of Lung. He himself was nothing in front of Lung. None of the people here were idiots. When they saw their companion's reaction, they immediately choked up and stopped joking around. Lung didn't even look at the person who stood up. The sofas were already full, so he just pulled over a chair and sat down. Cylin and the other two sat beside him as well. This way, a strange scene was formed. A dozen or so people were sitting on soft, luxurious sofas, while 4 people were sitting on chairs. Although they seemed to be sitting casually, the aura of these 4 people was too strong. The people sitting on the sofas felt they couldn't even raise their heads in front of these 4 people. It was as if there were nails on the sofas, making them feel uneasy. The thing that broke this strange situation was Pride's arrival. A bodyguard came in first to take a look, and when he saw the 4 people on Cylin's side, he froze for a moment. He was especially surprised when he saw Night. However, this made the bodyguard feel a lot more at ease. Originally, he thought this place would be very mixed up and would be bad for the young master's growth. But since this person was also here, then they didn't need to worry. The little wimp is here too? Night snorted. The moment he heard Night's voice, Pride, who had walked in with his chin held high and didn't even look anyone in the eye, bristled like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Night, why are you here? If a little wimp like you can come, why can't I? Pride turned his head away, dragged over a chair, and sat down next to him. Although he didn't like Night, he didn't even want to look at the people on the sofa. By now, even an idiot would know that these people sitting on chairs were not to be trifled with. Otherwise, why would Pride even look at them in the eye? The people sitting on the sofa each had their own thoughts and didn't say a single word. The way the girls looked at Cylin was different now. Cylin was munching on sunflower seeds at the side, watching the show. Interesting, I'll tell Diaz and the others about today's interesting events later. After Pride sat down, he looked curiously at C.I., Jinsheng, and Lung. He had seen Cylin on the transport vehicle, so he automatically ignored him. These are my roommates, Cylin, C.I., Jinsheng, and Lung. Night made a simple introduction, then turned around and said to Cylin and the others, This little wimp is called Pride. He only said his name and nothing else. Pride only snorted in dissatisfaction at Knight, calling him a little wimp. But if anyone else had called him that, Pride would definitely have turned hostile. He had no choice. He was defeated by Knight last time, so he could only endure this nickname. Pride gritted his teeth. He would get his revenge sooner or later and beat this guy until even pigs wouldn't recognize him. I didn't expect you to live in a quadruple room, Pride said disdainfully. Knight spread his hands. It can't be helped. I'm poor, so I can only eat at the canteen's public restaurant and can only live in a quadruple room that no one else chooses. It was Silen's friend who coincidentally brought us here today, but we don't seem to be welcome here. Alan's cold sweat poured down like a waterfall. He was wronged. He swore to the heavens that he did not, and would never dare to, have such thoughts. Alan didn't know what to say right now either. These people all had very strange tempers, and right now Alan couldn't figure out what they were thinking either. He could only look at Silen for help. After receiving Alan's SOS signal, Silen put down the melon seeds. I'm hungry, Alan. Prepare to serve the dishes. All right, let's serve a few dishes first. Please feel free to order whatever you want to eat. Alan hurriedly passed over a few menus, as if he had been liberated. In the end, on one end of the enormous rectangular table were 5 people sitting on chairs eating to their heart's content, while on the other end was a person sitting on a sofa, trembling with fear and cold sweat. In short, the atmosphere of this meal was strange. Knight was the type to finish fights quickly, so Knight had already finished 3 bowls before Pride had even finished his first bowl. However, Silen and the other 2 weren't slow either. After they finished eating, the 4 of them took their leave. Although Pride ate rather slowly, he didn't have the mood to eat after Knight, and the other 3 left. He pushed his bowl away and left. No matter what the remaining people said after they left, Silen and the other 3 didn't take it to heart. After they returned to the dormitory and tidied up their things, they had a good night's sleep. Early the next morning, Silen was woken up by Knight. After they finished choosing their classes, they went to the special training room at the school district to spar. According to the rules, students had 2 days to choose their classes after registration. Every dormitory was equipped with a platform, and the subjects were also used on that platform. During breakfast time, the 4 of them finished choosing their classes one after another. Breakfast was made by Lung's household robot, and it was pretty good. The 4 of them placed their breakfast ingredients in the kitchen and programmed the robot so that it would immediately eat breakfast after waking up. After breakfast, the 4 of them sat on Lung's flying car and headed to the training room at the school district. After all, the dormitory's training room was too small, and they could only do some simple training. If they wanted to fight freely, they could only go to the training room at the school district. There was more space there, and there were all kinds of training modes. There weren't many people using the training room today, so Silen used CI Jincheng's orange card to choose a spare medium-sized training room. This was because Silen and the other 2's red cards could only choose a small training room. Logically speaking, a small training room was only needed for a 2-man battle, but Knight felt that it was still too small, so he chose a medium-sized one. There were only Silen and the other 3 inside the medium-sized training room. CI Jincheng and Lung were watching from the quarantine area on the side, while Silen and Knight were doing warm-up exercises inside. They were digesting the breakfast they just ate. Their jackets were also left in the quarantine area so that they wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. Are you done? Knight asked. Yes, let's begin. Chapter 28. When Knight asked the question, his knees were slightly bent, and he placed his center of gravity on the tip of his toes. He clenched his fists in front of him, ready to fight at any moment. Silen raised his leg and took a step sideways. He spread his arms wide and placed them seemingly casually at his sides, but it looked like they were full of openings. When he finished saying, "Let's begin," the emotions in Silen's eyes gradually settled down. There was not a trace of emotion in them, a stark contrast to the intense battle intent in Knight's eyes. His former instructor said that he could determine the opponent's next move from the look in their eyes, but Knight could only see calmness in Silen's eyes, a calmness that was as deep as the abyss. Knight had seen calmness in many people's eyes, but those people were senior instructors or people like his own father. Knight had never seen such calmness among his peers. This Scylla gave Knight a very strange feeling. It was as if he was a quiet hunter waiting for his prey to fall into his net. Prey? Knight was amused by his own thoughts. Who's the hunter and who's the prey? We'll talk after we fight. Bam! Making the first move, Knight's figure instantly vanished from where he stood. The air where he stood let out a loud bang due to the instantaneous compression and collision. Knight rushed forward and his fist tightened the moment it reached Scylla's face. His speed was several times faster than before, and his strength was at its peak at this moment. Just when Knight thought he was about to hit Scylla, he felt his elbow sink. It was pulled away from its target as if it had entered a whirlpool. At the same time, Scylla's other hand passed through the gap and attacked Knight's neck. Knight raised his hand to block it. Instead of retreating, he took a step forward and punched at Scylla's face again. This time, the speed of the punch was much faster. Scylla could hear the friction between Knight's fist and the air, the kind that carried a crackling sound. Scylla dodged and moved away. He twisted his body and moved forward at the same time. A head-on confrontation? No, that's not it. That strange whirlpool-like force appeared once more and sucked Knight's fist away from its original line of attack, gluing it to Knight's fist. This time, Knight clearly saw the source of that strange force. It was the whirlpool formed by the movements of Scylla's palm and even his entire arm. Using softness to overcome hardness? When Knight was training in the past, both his instructor and his father had told him about using softness to overcome hardness. Since almost everyone in the Fiegler family was the hard and fierce type, Knight had learned many ways to deal with it so that he would not be at a disadvantage in the future. However, the one he liked the most was to add hardness to hardness, absolute hardness. Although he had this thought in his mind, the movements of his hands were definitely not slow. His knife hand went straight for Scylla's throat. In the next moment, the palm that was blocked did not completely retract. Instead, it quickly flipped over and struck Scylla's chest. He did not stop for even a moment, and his speed was still increasing. His eyes, ears, neck, throat, ribs, stomach, shins, tailbone. Every time he struck, he aimed at his target, but he would always be glued to the wall, the floor, and the ceiling by the cyclone. Up until now, Scylla hadn't actually attacked much. He was mostly defending. Every time he fought against a different opponent, he would always first observe his opponent's fundamentals and combat style. As he dealt with and neutralized his opponent's attacks, he would also improve on his own shortcomings and learn new techniques. Scylla had never seen Knight's fist style before. Although he could deal with it now, Scylla knew that Knight was changing step by step. At first, Scylla could still lead Knight's fist to a certain direction, but slowly, the attacks of the fists grew fiercer and faster. The power of the whirlpool could no longer control the attacks, and could only fling them away. This meant that Knight was slowly reaching the limits of this whirlpool. Banging sounds rang out continuously in the training room. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all starting to cave in. It was obvious just how powerful the punches were to be able to make a dent in the specially made walls and ceiling of the training room. C.I. Jincheng and Lung sighed in their hearts as they felt the tremors in the training room from the quarantine area. Isn't this too powerful? Jincheng, is Scylla's genotype really only B rank? C.I. Jincheng nodded. Scylla's enrollment profile showed that his genotype was B rank, but Knight was an actual A rank genotype. An A rank genotype against a B rank genotype with such fierce firepower right off the bat? Moreover, Scylla was still able to defend against Knight's attacks, even now. To be more precise, Scylla was taking advantage of the momentum and luring his opponent to miss. Looking at the shaking training room, Lung sighed, those people from the management department are probably starting to pay attention. It would be weird if they didn't notice such a huge commotion. It was just that the four of them had turned off all the monitors in the training room when they came in, but there was no way that the people from the management department wouldn't have a backup plan, right? C.I. Jincheng did not say anything. He took out a finger-sized device and pressed it. Many small probes and pinhole cameras appeared at the bottom, walls, and ceiling of the training room. There were also a few places where the surveillance equipment was merged with the wall. At first glance, There was nothing special about this place at all. At the same time, everything related to this training room on the monitors in the management department was blank. Even the records had been erased. Check the card reader in that training room. A person from the management department said. Found it. He didn't erase this card reader record. The card reader's name is C.I. Jincheng. His surname is C.I.? The person thought for a moment. Never mind. Don't bother with that training room. As long as they don't destroy the training room, let them do whatever they want. Because the commotion in Silen's training room was too big, the people who were originally training in the surrounding training rooms all came out of curiosity to see what was going on. Who was so awesome as to cause such a commotion? The few training rooms nearby could clearly feel the tremors. The group of people followed the sound and arrived in front of the training room. The room door was tightly shut, and it was still in no spectators allowed mode. They could not enter, so they could only gather in front of the door and discuss. People came over one after another to join the discussion circle. Neither Silen nor Knight had the heart to think about the reactions outside. The two of them fought faster and faster. They could still see after images before, but now they couldn't even catch a glimpse of them. Instead, fleeting bolts of lightning began to appear clearly. The Fiegler family's thunderstorm fist. C.I. Jincheng said, while looking at those bolts of lightning. I've heard of your name for a long time, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. Lung had only seen it in videos on electronic magazines before, but those were just blurry images. Normal magazines did not dare to analyze too much about things related to the military. Right now, Silen, who was defending against Knight's attacks in the field, could clearly feel the air around him beginning to stir restlessly. Some of the particles were starting to fission and release energy. And these changes were all caused by Knight. They were as dense as a rainstorm, carrying with them the momentum of a thunderbolt. Every time Knight punched out, there would be a flash of lightning, and the sound of crackling could be heard continuously. This wasn't fancy, it was real lightning. Silen could already feel the numbness from touching those tiny particles on his skin. It felt like he was inside an electric field, and the electric field was still strengthening. The number of fission particles increased, and the numbness grew stronger with every movement. Silen could even smell the burnt smell of his clothes burning. He definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer if this continued. Meanwhile, the bulging veins on Knight's arms and the speed of his punches were starting to slow down, showing that his strength was about to reach its peak. Bam! Silen used the force to fly a few steps back. Knight, who was pressing forward, noticed that Silen's arms shook and scattered the original cyclone. What replaced it was an aura that was completely different from before. It was unfathomable, immeasurable, and even suffocating. At this moment, the restless particles around Silen's body began to calm down. This is the real you, isn't it? While he was thinking, Knight's feet pushed off the ground again, and the momentum of his charge rose to its peak. The crackling lightning seemed like it was going to tear through space itself. Silen did not dodge Knight's attack, nor did he use his previous method of making it miss. Instead, he faced it head-on. He stood there, stretched out his fist, and met it head-on. Bang! Bang! These two sounds rang out almost at the same time. The recoil from the collision of the two fists sent Silen and Knight flying towards the walls on both sides. The students who were having a heated discussion outside the training room became deathly silent at this moment, because they saw that a human-shaped protrusion had been smashed into the wall. These students were very familiar with the resistance of the wall after training in the training room for such a long time. If they wanted to leave a footprint on the wall, they probably wouldn't even be able to break their bones. But what was going on in front of them? C.I. Jincheng and Lung's eyelids twitched as they watched. Fortunately, these two were not sent flying towards the quarantine area, or the quarantine layer would have been smashed as well. Knight was very strong. C.I. Jincheng and Lung knew this a long time ago. As someone from the same generation as them, even if they were in different fields, they would often hear high praises from their seniors. But what about Silen? Since when did the Duans family produce such a monster? How could a person who could fight Knight to a draw be an unknown person? He was like a star that had always been hidden in the darkness, watching the world quietly and then displaying his astounding brilliance in a place no one knew about. But no matter what, This star would soon appear before everyone's eyes. Since he had walked out of the darkness, his dazzling light could no longer be concealed. Chapter 29. Both Scylla and Knight were embedded into the two opposite walls of the training room. Scylla landed on the ground from the wall, moved his arms, and shrugged his shoulders. The crisp sound of bones cracking could be clearly heard every time he moved. On the other side, Knight's situation was almost the same. This is so good. This is the first time I've had such a good fight since I came to 7 Lights. Knight laughed quite happily. C.I. Jinsheng and Lung's faces twitched as they watched the duo's performance in the field from the quarantine area. These two were actually born with the zodiac sign of King Kong, weren't they? Both of them had smashed into a human shape on the wall. They crawled up and shook themselves, but they were completely fine. Scylla looked at the clothes on his body. There were a few spots that were obviously char-black. It was fortunate that he had brought a change of clothes for the sake of insurance. The training room did not have an individual changing room, and they were all men anyway. What was there to be shy about? They could just strip off their clothes and change. While Scylla and Knightley were changing their clothes, Lon picked up the mini camera and snapped pictures. Hee, next time I'll put your changing pictures up for auction on 7 Lights website. Lung, do you want to stick a picture on the wall too? Knight pointed at the 2 human-shaped depressions on the wall with his chin. Sigh, we're roommates after all. If worst comes to worst, I'll give you half of the profit. Speaking of which, Scylla, are you really a rank B genotype? A lot of rank A genotypes can't compare to you. He sure was quick to change the topic, but Knight was indeed led away by the topic. True. At the end, I felt like I had crashed into an armored car. Knight swung his arms and said, in truth, Scylla hadn't used much strength when he slapped the 2 flying cars down, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have slapped them to that extent. Scylla smiled. It's because of my constitution. You should enter the military with that constitution of yours. I guarantee that you'll rise quickly. Pride's second brother Ji Fei Hong is a good example. Back when he was a recruit, he single-handedly challenged an entire class. My dad called it an A+ constitution, and the reason for this phenomenon might be hybrid advantage. Hybrid advantage. Indeed, just from the names of Pride and his second brother, one could tell that their parents were not of the same race. Of the 2 sons, one was named after their father and the other after their mother. But, Knight continued, I know of some people whose parents are not of the same race, but their genotype is only rank B, which is a far cry from their parents' rank A genotype. Of course, I don't know about your situation, Scylla. I don't know about the Duance family situation either. Knight was in a good mood right now, so he was especially talkative. Lung narrowed his eyes and rubbed his chin. If that's the case, wouldn't our child have a higher chance of being A+ genotype if I find a woman from another galaxy? C.I. Jinsheng looked thoughtful. There are indeed people who have researched this before. Some people think that the further the parents are from each other, the higher the chances of their children being genetically superior. All right, Lung clapped. I'll find a woman from another galaxy to be my wife in the future. You've decided to stay clean? Scylla asked in disbelief. That's 2 different things. The wife is from another galaxy, but the lover doesn't have many requirements. Tisk. The 3 of them looked at him in disdain. Scylla would never tell anyone the truth about his physique. The chip integrated into his body was his biggest secret. Outside the training room, a group of students were discussing whether the person inside was an instructor or an upper grade student when the door to the training room opened. The discussion immediately stopped. Scylla and the other 3 walked out one after another. Scylla and the other 3 only swept a glance at the students gathered outside the training room before walking straight towards the exit. Who are those for? They don't have student badges, so I don't know which year they are. It's that guy. Some of the upper grade students recognized Lung. Lung's name spread very quickly among the upper grade students, because this young master of the Andrire family was the one who interacted the most with the upper grade students who set up stalls at the trade area during this period of time. So he's this year's first grade students? That's way too fierce. Someone looked at the human-shaped protrusion that had smashed into the training room's wall and gulped. Not even the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade students who specialized in military affairs could have such destructive power. Could they? Not far away, a couple of 3rd grade students were leaning on the railing and withdrawing their gazes from Cylin and the other 3. Fiegler Knight? I didn't expect that guy to come to Seven Lights. Didn't he always look down on all academies other than the military academies? A young man wearing an ear stud said. His voice was thick with sarcasm. Oh, you know them, Stuart? Which one is Knight? The person beside him asked curiously. The ear stud young man called Stuart did not say anything. He seemed to not want to talk about it. At the same time, 2 girls were also having a discussion on a teaching building slightly further away from here. There was a long-distance viewing device placed in front of them. Sister Fu Luo, who do you think was fighting inside just now? The girl who spoke looked a little younger. She blinked her big eyes, and her voice carried a hint of playfulness. When she smiled, 2 little dimples would appear on her cheeks, making her look very cute. What do you think? The girl called Fu Luo only smiled faintly, elegant and fresh. The younger girl held her chin and pointed at Knight on the screen. This guy must be one of them. That battle aura hasn't died down yet. She then pointed at C.I. Jincheng. This guy definitely didn't fight. As for the other 2 guys, her big eyes swept between Lung and Cylin before she pointed at Cylin. This guy has a higher chance of fighting. I think so too. But why do they look completely fine after crashing into the walls of the training room like that? Fu Luo stared at the ruby-like flying car that rose into the sky and flew into the distance with a complicated look in her eyes. She had a feeling that the coming days of Seven Lights would not be peaceful. After Cylin returned to the accommodation, he took a good bath, ate the fast food the robot prepared, and shut his door to sleep. He needed to analyze today's battle in detail in that state. During his sleep, every step of his sparring session with Knight replayed clearly in his mind. Knight's every movement, the contraction and contraction of every muscle, the minute changes in the surrounding air, the fission of particles, the generation of electricity, everything began to play in slow motion in high definition. However, Cylin's sleep did not last too long. At least he woke up the next morning. He looked at the time display on the bedside, scratched his head, and went downstairs to wash up. The smell of breakfast was already coming from downstairs. Just as he went downstairs, he saw Lung swinging his legs while shouting at the teacher information display on the hostel's teaching platform. Look, this teacher's eyes are so pretty. They look like shit. Cylin, are you praising or insulting me? C.I. Jincheng, who was eating his breakfast and spreading mayonnaise on his bread, paused when he heard this. He frowned at the mayonnaise on the bread and suddenly lost his appetite. Cylin did not care that much. He needed to replenish his energy after exhausting his brain power. After asking the robot to make him 5 portions of the same breakfast, he picked up the ham bread on the table and took a bite. Where's Knight? Lung raised his hand and pointed upwards. He's fixing that wireless jammer or something on the roof. All right, Cylin, we can use our internet now. Jincheng installed something so that the people from the management department can't find our real information. This also means that we don't have to worry about being caught and having our credits deducted even if we curse the headmaster on Seven Lights. It's not just Seven Lights. The internet of Sector B's University Alliance will work as well. C.I. Jincheng said affirmatively. That's great. I had a flash of inspiration yesterday and compiled a love letter. I'm going to send it to all the beauties of Sector B's universities. Lung took out his tablet excitedly. Cylin and C.I. Jincheng moved closer to see just what kind of touching confession it was. The words on the tablet were, "You are that fire. The moment you appeared, all the blood in my body began to boil my soul and boil for you. That heat that seeped deep into my bones made me willing to search for you in all the carnations in the galaxy. I was not willing to stop for anyone else." Cylin and C.I. Jincheng were sweating profusely, leaving aside the horrifying words of all the blood in his body, cooking his soul. What the hell was up with that carnation? The duo pointed at the word carnation on the tablet that was rendered in pink and crimson tones and looked towards Lung. Isn't carnation a symbol of burning love? Lung opened his eyes wide with an innocent look on his face. Then what does a red rose symbolize? Silin asked again. Lung said with an expression that even a child would know this. Of course I know this. It's a curse. Silin and C.I. Jincheng. Curse my ass. Knight, who was walking down the stairs after installing the jammer and about to show off, was so shocked that he nearly fell down the stairs. Every day, every day, every day. Young master, even if you're writing a love letter, you can't just use flowery words carelessly. Silin and the others finally deeply understood what was missing in this young master's brain. Chapter 30. On the day of the freshmen's opening ceremony, Silin's quartet sat a few rows at the back of the auditorium. Silin was sleeping on his chair. Knight was playing with the tank model in his hands. C.I. Jincheng was reading a book, and Lung was looking left and right at the beauties. In short, none of the quartet paid attention to the speech of the freshman representative and 7 lights higher-ups at the center stage. In reality, there were a lot of students like them. However, Silin suddenly heard a familiar voice in his sleep state. He woke up from his slumber and opened his eyes to look at the center stage. As expected, it was a familiar face. The speaker was one of the vice headmasters of 7 Lights, the head of the scientific research department, Mo Hong. He was also the old man Silin met at the train station at the trade zone. When Silin looked over, the speaking Mo Hong suddenly noticed Silin's gaze. After a moment of blankness, a rather meaningful smile appeared on Mo Hong's face. Vice headmaster and Ting, who was sitting next to Mo Hong and thinking about what to eat for lunch, suddenly shivered. He looked up and saw Mo Hong's strange smile. To those who did not know Mo Hong, the smile looked amiable, but those who did know Mo Hong knew that this old man must be up to something again. Silin suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. What on earth was this vice headmaster trying to do? Silin's quartet left impatiently when the opening ceremony was finally over. They were really bored to death sitting there. After the opening ceremony, it was time for class to officially begin. 7 Lights offered a lot of courses, and they were divided into major categories: literature, economics, theory, engineering, military, and so on. There were no other restrictions, such as category restrictions aside from rank restrictions. However, if a student chose a course but failed the exam in the end, then apologies, not only would their credits not increase, they would even be deducted. Therefore, normally, students would choose a major that they were familiar with. They would be able to advance as long as they had enough credits. If they could not meet the minimum requirements, they would have to repeat a year, and if they could not advance in 3 years, they would be forced to drop out of school. However, if they could obtain enough credits, they could apply to advance in advance. The military was what the male students yearned for the most, but it was also the hardest to obtain credits. Therefore, if one wanted to choose the military, they had to first weigh themselves. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret it even if they lost themselves. Of course, it was impossible for the academy to stifle the enthusiasm of the students. Each major category had its own elective courses. Those who were interested in that category but were not sure if they could get all the credits could choose the elective courses. The credits for the elective courses were only 1/10 of the credits for the original courses, but they were easy to get, and the teachers were not strict, so they were quite popular among the students. C.I. Jincheng had chosen some courses under the general category of literature. Since he was a specially enrolled student, there were other standards. Lung mainly chose economics, but he also chose literature as an elective because there were many beauties there. In his words, he was going there to wash his eyes. Without a doubt, Knight chose the military category. He wasn't interested in anything else. As for Silin, he had chosen a few courses under each major, and none of them were electives. As long as their schedules didn't clash and they were within class time, he would choose them all. It could be said that Silin's daily schedule was relatively full. Of course, weekends didn't count. Weekends were a time for rest and recuperation. Due to the different courses they chose, the chances of the 4 of them meeting each other during the day was much lesser. Silin bought another hoverboard. After all, he couldn't always count on Lung's flying car, and everyone's class schedule was different. Specially enrolled students like C.I. Jincheng often stayed over at the research division, while Knight often stayed over at the training division. After all, it was more convenient there. Lung would drive his flying car to the trade area every day after class to tease the higher grade students, causing everyone in the trade area to want nothing more than to run away from Lung the moment they saw him. Therefore, in this way, only Sillin was a permanent resident of the dormitory. But that was fine. It made it more convenient for Sillin to handle some matters. That Boston creeper wrapped in ecological film was going to stick up if it wasn't dealt with soon. On the first weekend of the semester, Sillin was the only one in the dormitory. Sillin took out a clean tray from inside his room, tore open the ecological film, and placed the vine on top. The surrounding nutrient solution didn't seem to be of much help to it. The green color of the leaf appeared dim and weak. Sillin placed his finger on the leaf and closed his eyes, feeling the information transmitted from his finger. The division of every cell on the leaf, the different components within the cells, the interpretation of genetic information. The relevant information and data flashed through his mind, and the biochip integrated into the chromosomes in Sillin's body analyzed everything it came into contact with like a precise instrument. Sillin had a very strange feeling. It was different from those lifeless things. This kind of pulsating liveliness gave Sillin the urge to communicate with it. Sillin seemed to have found this vine's life code. If he could decipher this code, he would be able to understand this plant's survival conditions. More specifically, he would be able to know what this plant needed the most right now. Sillin could clearly sense what this vine was yearning for, and at the same time, he could also sense its weakness and unease. Thoughts? That's right, that's their thoughts. Sillin remembered Jinya's words very clearly. Back then, Jinya had told Sillin while sitting under the Fuji tree, "There are very few people who truly care about the lives of plants, but in reality, they desire to communicate more than anything. The resonance of life is much easier to win their favor than a rigid machine." Of course, Jinya's words were actually based on the Fuji tree. Fuji trees were considered superior in the world of plants, or else they wouldn't have been called upper tree Fuji. Jinya had also said that the higher the grade, the clearer their thoughts. They were like a species between plant and animal, with the form of a plant and the thoughts of an animal. From the looks of it, this mutated Boston creeper was actually an evolved species. Sillin could accurately contact that kind of clear thoughts. His thoughts were transmitted through the biochip in his body to the leaf, and Sillin expressed his kindness. This vine was like a child that had just left its mother's womb. After coming into contact with Sillin's kindness, it felt a long-lost sense of security and transmitted its thoughts. Sillin picked up the tray, looked at the vine on the tray, and said quietly, "Don't worry, I'm right here, right next to you." Before he left, Sillin installed a button. This was set by CI Jinsheng, so when it was activated, the people outside would see the scene inside as preset and would not be able to see the true changes that were happening in the courtyard. On the ground directly below the window of Sillin's bedroom, Sillin chiseled away the foundation surface of the house and exposed the soil underneath. He put the vine down and sprinkled some normal nutrient solution on it, and the vine began to change at a speed visible to the naked eye. The color of the leaf began to become full of life, and the vine began to grow and extend, climbing up 1 foot after another. At the same time, when it reached a certain height, both sides of the vine began to grow more and more branches. Sillin sat on the lawn and watched it grow, extending into the surroundings step by step. In reality, they were very easy to raise, and they didn't have high requirements for their environment. It wasn't that they didn't want to absorb those nutrients before, but that this child that had left its mother's body was too vigilant. If their vigilance wasn't quelled, they would rather wither and return to the dust than accept the relief that was delivered to them. The instruments inside Seven Lights Research Zone's Institute of Botany could analyze this plant's genetic code and related traits in detail, but they couldn't communicate with this plant. This was the difference between a machine and a living being. The wonder of life was that it couldn't be explained with words, but one could clearly feel that living existence. At dusk, Sillin looked at the plant that had already covered most of the dormitory's surface and smiled. Those 3 fellows would probably be shocked when they returned, wouldn't they? Chapter 31. Speaking of which, Not even 2 days after Sillin had planted the Bigfoot Boston ivy, Lung nearly charged straight into the hostel when he drove his flying car into the hostel's courtyard. He hurriedly stopped the flying car and circled around the hostel a couple of times, staring left and right at the Boston ivy and clicking his tongue in wonder. "Sillin, you have to sell me the method to cultivate this plant," Lung said with shining eyes. Sillin shook his head. "There's nothing special about the growing conditions for this plant, and I used a normal nutrient solution that costs 100 star coins a bottle, and I only used one bottle. Bullsh asterisk T. Even if you only used a bottle of normal nutrition fluid, there must be some special method behind it. Otherwise, why wouldn't those people from the research division be able to figure it out after so long?" Lung said as he fiddled with the leaves of a creeper climbing on the dormitory's wall. This plant was growing really well. Spreading his hands, Sillin indicated that he had no idea either. This plant might need to be appeased. Lung had a doubtful look on his face, but then he smiled. That's really possible. There are some things that didn't need to be said. They were all smart people, and who didn't have secrets that they couldn't share? However, Lung really did take Sillin's words to heart. Sillin wouldn't speak without thinking. It was fine to fool others, but he wouldn't do that to himself, because Sillin had long since promised to sell the method to Lung first. Actually, back then, Sillin hadn't expected that the growing conditions for this plant would actually be like this. If it was just a combination of nutrient solution, then so be it. Sillin could really sell the recipe that way. But this method, seeing Lung flip the leaves, Sillin continued. A child that has just been forcibly separated from its mother, forced to eat by a knife-wielding stranger. Even if it opens its mouth to eat, how can it grow well? Not to mention those with a more unyielding temperament. Lung deeply agreed. Makes sense. And the subsequent developments clearly proved Sillin's words. This plant would be exposed to the public sooner or later. So when Sillin simply removed the screen settings, news of this mutated B.C. ivy was quickly made known to the research division. The answer Sillin Helong gave was very simple. He didn't know. The people from the research division's botany department suspiciously pruned this B.C. ivy and moved it to the research division for cultivation, and after 2 days of careful care, it died. Instrument tests also showed that the one in Sillin's dormitory was no different from the sample from the research division, and the soil analysis was also inconclusive. It was just as Sillin said, it only had the 100 star coins of normal nutrient solution. It was at this moment that the person who had sampled from the planet where the mother plant grew had returned with a small but intact Boston ivy. After much care, the small Boston ivy had finally managed to survive, but it was obvious that its growth was nowhere near as good as Sillin's. But this was the matter for the people from the botany department, and Sillin. Sillin, and Sillin of. This period of Sillin's military training could be considered the initial phase of the course, and he was only active in the teaching area. Every class was focused on training his physique. If his physique couldn't be improved, then he would be looking for a beating at the training area. Only after improving their physique would they be allowed to go to the training division for the next step of their training. It was a rare sight to see Knight, who had skipped class 3 times. This fellow was still standing there with a stern face, as if he was unwilling to leave. The instructor directly ignored him. Everyone knew who this guy was anyway. They were also clear about his abilities. Just let him be. This training class is to run 100 kilograms of weights around the field. The passing line is 10 laps. After 15 laps, you can proceed to the next step of training. You don't need to run with weights in the next few classes. If you can run 20 laps, you can go directly to the training area and don't waste your time here. The instructor spoke in a very relaxed tone, but upon hearing these words, many of the students gasped. Each lap of the field was 1 kilometer, and 10 laps would be 10 kilometers. Wouldn't it be tiring to carry 100 kilograms of weight? Sillin tied 25 kilograms of weights to his arms and legs. After some thought, he added 50 kilograms to his back. Otherwise, it wouldn't have much effect on improving his physique. Knight was instantly delighted when he saw this. Sillin, you're a man. As he said this, he also added 50 kilograms to his back. Originally, he had wanted to finish running earlier and go to the training division, but adding a bit of challenge wasn't bad either. Nearby, the instructors and adjutants became interested in Sillin after seeing this. Although Sillin's performance wasn't bad the previous 3 times, he had stopped after reaching the standard. They wondered if running with Knight today would force out this kid's ability. Everyone knew that they had to maintain their pace, but when so many people started running at the same time, their competitive spirit rose and their minds heated up. Some of them began to panic. Their speed at the beginning exceeded their original plan, and the effect was a chain reaction. When the people at the back saw that they were about to be left behind, they also increased their speed. Not far away, the instructors sat there leisurely chatting. One of them pointed at the running students and said, "Most of these guys are B-rank genotypes, but they can't even compare to the military C rank. They're a pure waste of genetic resources. That's why I said they need to be F***. Even if we don't hold them to military school standards, we still can't ruin our reputation. After all, people like us who are sent to non-military academies have our names in the League of Stars military headquarters. If these guys go out and get knocked down by people from other academies, we'll lose a lot of face when we return to the League of Stars military. That's why I asked Boss Wood to force that kid Knight over. It's all for this lesson to give these arrogant guys a beating." You don't say. That kid Knight is really not bad. Of course. Don't you know who his father is? How can he be a weakling? While the instructors were chatting, the jogging Sillin and Knight were also chatting. The two of them were running at the front of the group. Knight was bored, so he pulled Sillin along as they ran. This caused the people around them to look at the two of them like rare animals. They were actually chatting while running with weights. The two of them did not pay any attention to their breathing rhythm at all. It felt no different from walking and chatting. F***CK, you'll regret it in 2 laps. Some people thought. Sillin knew that Knight was very impatient when he came to class, but he still underestimated Knight's resentment. Tonight, this kind of class was a pure waste of time. Then why are you here today? I don't have a choice. We have to swipe our cards to sign in, and the number of people who show up will be counted in the final score. Uncle Hua. The head of the training department. He said he could help with this, but he asked me to come here once in a while. All right. How's the ivy in our dormitory looking? I heard that the people from the Institute of Botany are so conflicted that their hair is about to fall off. When Sillin sent the image of the ivy to Ci, Jincheng, and Knight, everyone was shocked. It's all right. The people from the research department came over to collect soil again yesterday. TSK, I despise them to the extreme. Those guys are so stubborn. And so, the two of them talked from the Ivy to the training department's senior year training, and then to the military academy's training. It sounded like it was completely incomparable to the training here. No wonder Knight looked down on the people around him who complained about being tired so much. The two of them did not care about the other students' running speed as they chatted, and before they knew it, the two of them had started to take the lead. The students who were panting behind them looked at the two of them chatting casually and sincerely wondered if their weights were bubbles. That kid Sillin, he's not bad. The instructor pointed to the other side. It's the 7th lap, and he's still fine. He's someone who carries 150 kilograms like Knight, and his genotype is only B rank. He's a good seedling. Sillin and Knight only talked as they ran, completely ignoring the people behind them. Knight did not even keep track of the number of laps. He always stopped when he reached his limit in the past. Slowly, they left the people behind them more than 1 lap behind, and some of the weaker ones were left more than 3 laps behind. It's been 10 laps, right? Sillin asked. Sai, who cares? Let's chat some more. Where were we? All right, let's chat some more. Report to the training department directly after you finish 20 laps. Haha, how loyal. Knight reached out and patted Sillin's shoulder. He was very satisfied with Sillin's explanation. Then, he continued to talk about the situation at the training division. Knight grew even more excited when he talked about Pride making a fool of himself over there. He was happy to see Pride making a fool of himself. And so, Knight's laughter could be heard in the huge field. Oh my God, you don't know the look on that kid's face at the time? I was dying of laughter, huh? The students who were clenching their teeth and persisting in running on the field blacked out, wishing they could pass out. Was this guy going to let them live? He was still in the mood to joke. His laughter was still so sonorous and forceful after running so many laps. How could they endure it? Some of the students felt that those two had just run past them, and not long after, they brushed past them again, and then again, and again. When Scylla and Knight finished running 20 laps, a few students were still continuing. They hadn't even finished 10 laps, and the instructor had just shouted that they had to finish these 10 laps even if they had to crawl, or their credits would be deducted. Comparisons were odious. That was what the students were thinking at the moment. A few of them personally checked the weights of Scylla and Knight after they finished running, and the weights were solid, and they were even over the limit. Those who usually boasted that they weren't bad wanted to vomit blood. After running 20 laps, Knight pulled Scylla in front of the instructor and gave him a formal salute, then said proudly, "See, my brother, not bad, right? A brother from the same dormitory. Instructor, you must keep your word. We won't come here next time. We'll train directly at the training department." After running 20 laps, Knight and Scylla were only a little out of breath, but their spirits were still very good, and it looked like they would recover in no time. The instructor did not mind Knight's tone towards them. Besides, this wasn't a real army, and with this kid's bad temper, it was already giving them face by saluting and calling them instructor. Waving his hand, the instructor said with a smile, go on, keep working hard when you're there." After the two of them walked far away, the adjutant on the side said, "I've long heard from the security team that kid called Scylla looks unremarkable, but he really hides it well. His stamina is definitely on par with Knight." Chapter 32. Naturally, Scylla was happy to be able to go directly to the training division for training. But this also brought about a problem. There would be a class conflict because the training division's time was completely different from the military class here. Moreover, it would take more than half an hour of flight time to take a direct bus from the teaching area to the training division. Scylla did not have Knight's privilege and could only choose to skip a few classes. As long as he didn't skip too many, he should be able to pass the final exam. If it wasn't for the fact that attendance was tied to credits, Scylla could have skipped many classes. He would only need to look through them once to understand them, and even if he went, he would only sleep. Only when he encountered some in-depth and interesting things would Scylla perk up and listen. After all, there weren't many in-depth things in the first grade classes. The sooner he obtained enough credits, the sooner he could apply for the higher grade classes. The training division's shooting range. The students were practicing shooting 100 bullets at a high-speed moving target. In the end, the one with the highest hit rate was Knight, 100%. The second was Pride. He was also 100%, but he used 2 seconds more than Knight. In third place was Scylla, with a hit rate of 99%. At first, Scylla's results surprised everyone, but everyone got used to it later on. During the few shooting practices, Scylla would always miss 1 or 2 shots and settle for third place. What a dark horse. Although he can't compare to Knight and Pride, he's not worse than some of the higher grade students. The person tallying the scores said, "It's a bit of a pity. That kid Scylla missed another shot. If he didn't miss that shot, he might be able to fight for second place with Pride." Another person also said, Juanil frowned and said nothing. He would personally come to watch the two little devils Knight and Pride's class, in case he couldn't explain to the military if something went wrong. But after every shooting lesson, Juanil couldn't help but feel that there was something wrong with that kid Scylla, but he couldn't put his finger on it. After shooting, Scylla put away his gun and turned to leave. Just then, Pride was also walking towards the door. When he saw Scylla, he raised his chin and said, "Yo, the eternal third. Nobody wants to compete with you on who can lift their chin higher. Hurry up and F***CK off, you little brat who can even choke on a fish." Knight said disdainfully as he walked over from behind Pride. It was obvious that Knight's words had stabbed Pride's sore spot. Pride had publicized the incident where he got stuck while eating fish to become a laughingstock. Pride glared angrily at the two of them before he snorted and left with his chin raised. Knight curled his lips at Pride's back. "Ignore that brat. Come, let's go have a drink." The food at the training division isn't bad. You know, back in the military academy, we weren't allowed to drink. We were so hungry. In truth, Scylla didn't care about being third at all. He could guarantee that he would hit all the shots in half the time Knight took. but this would undoubtedly bring a lot of suspicion and trouble. Sillin didn't want to be too conspicuous. He was happy to enjoy the benefits of being in the top 3. Everything else should be done in moderation. The courses at the training area were divided into many categories. Other than shooting, there were military theory, military geography, tactical coordination, and piloting skills of warships, airplanes, armored vehicles, and so on. Sillin had learned quite a bit from them. But these days wouldn't last long. Today, Sillin skipped his classes at the teaching area and sat on the direct passenger flying car from the academy's teaching area to the training area. The flying car suddenly stopped not long after it took off. It seemed that the fight between 2 students had caused some problems in the flying car's energy system. Sillin looked at the time. The flying car's energy system repair would probably take half an hour, but he could still make it for the classes over there. Let's take a nap first. Sillin could vaguely hear a conversation not far away. I'm so lucky today. Thank you, Eldermo, you've worked hard. Moreover, Sillin also sensed that someone was looking in his direction. He opened his eyes and turned to look. Celine regretted at the moment he saw it. It really is you, kid. You actually dared to skip class. The person was Mo Hung. Hello, Headmaster Mo. The corner of Sillin's mouth twitched. No matter how he looked at it, the smile on Mo Hung's face sent a chill down his spine. Mo Hung ignored the driver and the others. He narrowed his eyes and took steady steps as he said leisurely, You should be taking an engineering class at this time, right? Mechanical construction class? Fine. You've actually been paying attention to me for a long time, haven't you? You even told me what class I'm taking. How am I supposed to argue? He looked at Sillin's backpack. Are we going to the training division? Yeah, you're not allowed to go. Come with me. I have something to tell you. After taking 2 steps, Mo Hung turned around and saw that Sillin wasn't moving. He raised his grizzled eyebrows. Hurry up. What are you dawdling for? You're wasting the other passengers' time. Sillin braced himself and followed Mo Hung out of the passenger flying car. Headmaster Mo, the training division still had a shooting class today. This would be included in their usual scores. Mo Hung raised a hand to stop Sillin's words. He dialed the communicator in front of Sillin, and the call was connected almost immediately. Huanil's image was displayed on the screen. Little male, I'm taking Sillin with me. Yes, take him with you. The answer was very powerful. It was clean, decisive, and without the slightest hesitation. Sillin, after the call ended, Mo Hung sat in his private car and hooked his finger at Sillin smugly. Good boy, come with this old man. Mo Hung had left this way because he had something to attend to at the last minute. He didn't expect to run into a passenger flying car with a malfunctioning energy system. So he lent a hand in passing and shortened the repair time that should have taken half an hour to 5 minutes. It was also thanks to this coincidence that Mo Hung caught the skipping class Sillin. Sillin sat in Mo Hung's private car and arrived at the research division's mechanical engineering division. With Mo Hung's guidance, Sillin entered the building almost unimpeded. Mo Hung tossed him a set of work clothes. Change into it and come with me. Although he didn't know what Mo Hung was planning, Sillin still did as he was told. He followed Mo Hung into a workshop. Scattered parts were scattered all over the place. I'll give you half an hour to assemble a complete mechanical object. If you don't pass the inspection, you'll be disqualified. If you don't pass, you won't be leaving today. You'll get a 0 in your mechanical engineering course. Mo Hung closed the door and locked it. Sillin looked at the tightly shut steel door and scratched his head. After letting out a sigh, he looked towards the workshop. Sillin could tell which parts could be assembled with just a glance. But there would always be a few missing parts if he wanted to assemble a fully functional mechanical body. Sillin didn't start assembling immediately. Instead, he quickly categorized the parts and memorized where each part was used to form the mechanical body. Just like that, the mechanical blueprints gradually became complete in Sillin's mind as he categorized the parts. Mo Hung gave him 30 minutes, but there were too many parts in this workshop. It took him 20 minutes just to categorize them. The remaining 10 minutes should be enough. Among the 7 piles of parts, there were only 2 that could be assembled completely. Sillin chose the slightly simpler pile and began to assemble it. Mo Hung sat in his office and looked at the monitor in front of him with a gratified smile. Mo Hung had tested the parts in the workshop with other people in the research division, but they either thought that they couldn't assemble it completely or could only identify one part of the assembly. However, Sillen was able to identify both parts in such a short amount of time. One had to know that the time given to the students for the test was 10 hours. Many of these students were specially recruited students. That was why Mo Hung said that Sillen was qualified to be specially recruited at the train station. Chapter 33. Sillen recalled the scene of Mo Hung assembling the parts at the train station. The strength of each finger, the angle of contact, the accuracy. After glancing at the pile of parts he had chosen, Sillen did not move his eyes away from the parts in his hands. Although his eyes barely moved, Sillen could always immediately reach for the correct parts for the next step. At first, Sillen's speed was slow, but after familiarizing himself with the finger control and estimating the assembly accuracy, Sillen's hands began to move faster. In his office, Mo Hung watched Sillen's assembly movements. He was so excited that his whole body began to tremble. He stood up from his chair, enlarged the screen, and looked at the artistic assembly on the screen. The further he went, the faster Sillen's assembly speed became. Not only did the accuracy not decrease, it even showed signs of increasing. Mo Hung stared at the screen and said to the computer, "Analyze overall accuracy." Scanning, overall accuracy reached 97% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 98% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.2% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.3% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.5% of theoretical value. In the end, the overall accuracy reached 99.95% of theoretical value. Every step after that reached 99.95%. Whether Sillen was assembling one part or several at the same time, the accuracy was still 99.95%. The overall accuracy was calculated by bringing the various parameters obtained after the scan into the technical formula. The higher the overall accuracy, the closer the assembly person was to the legendary point. In the workshop, the pile of parts was assembled into components and parts by Sillen. Then, Sillen assembled the components and parts. He did not even need to test the circuit to be sure that there would be no mistakes in such assembly. It was definitely an excellent assembly. In the 9th minute, Sillen finished assembling and pressed a button on the assembly machine. The machine was half an arm tall. Other than its bottom, which was used for stability, most of its upper part began to unfold like petals. It was like a flower bud was blooming, bringing with it a crystal-like music. It made people feel as if, after a long wait, they had slowly walked out of the darkness and welcomed the first ray of light. Sillen finally understood why so many engineers were obsessed with these things. Looking at the completed machinery, the raw joy in his heart was so touching. Sillen sat cross-legged on the ground. Amidst the flowing music, he stared at the machines in front of him in a daze. He watched as they opened and closed, then continued to bloom and close, just like a cycle. It was only when Mo Hung opened the door that Sillen came back to his senses. Mo Hung walked up to Sillen and sat down. "Sillen, do you know about the Golden Point?" Sillen shook his head. Many of the contents of the first-year curriculum were not mentioned in depth, and the books that Sillen had read in the past did not mention it either. Many books don't mention the Golden Point because it only exists in the minds of people in our circle. The correct parts, the correct position, and the most perfect assembly precision in the shortest time. The point that satisfies these conditions is called the Golden Point. As he spoke, Mo Hung displayed the results of the computer's calculations when Sillen was assembling. Sillen looked at the final 99.95% and frowned. None of the final stages had improved. Mo Hung pointed at the final 99.95% and said, "When this number becomes 100%, you will have reached the Golden Point. You are very good, Sillen. I can see that you haven't come into contact with these things often, but to be able to reach 99. 95% is much better than some of the teachers in Seven Lights. Have you reached the golden point, sir? Sillin looked at M.O. Hung. When he spoke of this, M.O. Hang's tone suddenly turned weathered. No, no one in the entire GL has reached it. We have always been approaching the golden point, but no one has reached it. Some people say that the golden point is just a theoretical limit that is impossible to reach, but I have always believed that the golden point can be reached. Sillin lowered his head and looked at the machines that were still blooming and closing in front of him. He listened quietly to M.O. Hang's narration. There were many things that could not be learned from books. After M.O. Hung explained a few things about the golden point, he continued to sigh, I'm already old, and the will is willing, but the strength is insufficient. Even if I know what I should pay attention to when I assemble and where I can improve, my hand speed and control cannot reach the state I expected. M.O. Hung slapped his knee and sighed as if he wanted to vent all the regrets in his heart. He glanced at Sillin, who still had his head lowered. This bastard kid actually has no reaction at all. Work harder. M.O. Hung let out another sigh, this time carrying even more of the sadness of a hero past his prime. I will never be able to reach a higher point in my life, and the saddest and most helpless thing is that I have no successor. My son chose to join the military, and I didn't have any students that I was particularly satisfied with when I was a teacher in my early years, unlike some of the old fellows in the Alliance who were lucky enough to meet a good disciple. Sigh, this is fate. If only I had met someone as talented as you earlier. While sighing, M.O. Hang's eyes drifted towards Sillin. The latter's head was still lowered, and he did not say a word. His expression could not be seen either. M.O. Hung cursed in his heart. You little bastard, I've already said it so clearly. Can't you at least show some reaction? Logically speaking, shouldn't you be recommending me excitedly? How can you be so stupid instead of treasuring such a good opportunity? Stupid as hell. Wooden head. It seems that old Mr. M.O. has forgotten that he was just praising the so-called wooden head just now. Seeing that Sillin was unable to get anything out of him, M.O. Hung was furious. Can't you at least show some reaction, kid? Sillin found it funny. M.O. Hang's hurry up and become my disciple expression and the intense gaze that occasionally glanced at him made it hard for Sillin to not know what M.O. Hung was thinking. However, as a hunter, he would not stay in Seven Lights for long. He would leave once the mission was over, and Duan Sillin would disappear from everyone's sight. What should he do then? About that, there are so many specially recruited students. Don't talk to me about specially recruited students. Those who don't meet my requirements are under the names of other instructors, and their direct instructor isn't me either. Under M.O. Hang's intense gaze, Sillin rubbed his forehead and said, there are a lot of professional knowledge that I don't know, and since I've taken so many courses, I need to get my credits. I don't have too much extra time. Before Sillin could finish, M.O. Hung waved his hand and said, those courses are all for show and don't have much practical use. Attending those courses is a pure waste of time. I'll just give you credit straight away, and I bet those great instructors won't dare say anything. Sillin sweated on the inside. Vice Headmaster M.O., please don't say this outside, or the teachers and students of Seven Lights will hold a grudge against you. How about it? Are you going to be my disciple or not? Seeing that M.O. Hang's eyebrows were showing signs of becoming more and more vertical, Sillin considered for a moment and finally said, how about this? I'll be your intern for now, and we'll talk again if you're satisfied with my performance. What do you think? I don't want an intern or anything. It sounds awful. I'll just be a research assistant. All right, I'll be a research assistant if you say so. Sillin didn't know that for many people like M.O. Hung, a research assistant was a disciple. Therefore, without Sillin's knowledge, M.O. Hung had directly equated a research assistant with a disciple. M.O. Hung was overjoyed. He grabbed Sillin's face and said, with me, the head of the research division, teaching you personally, what else do you have to be dissatisfied with? Right now you're taking advantage of me, and you're still pretending to be obedient. Yes, I'm pretending to be obedient, Sillin allowed M.O. Hung to pull both sides of his face and shake it. Sigh, why does this old man like to pull people's faces? It's almost swollen. Sillin didn't know that M.O. Hang's son the general of the GL Army, had always carried baby fat on his face before he entered a high military academy at the age of 15. Chapter 34. On the same day, Mo Hung changed the access control system of the Research Institute. Silin was the only person who could enter the research division with a red card, and Silin had the right to enter many places that even the specially recruited fourth years were not allowed to enter. It was a good thing that most of the people in the Research Institute stayed in the research division, or else Silin's receiving Vice Headmaster Mo's favor would be known by many people. Many of the first-year classes that Silin had chosen were approved by Mo Hung directly. Since the Vice Headmaster had given the go-ahead, the grade instructors did not dare to say anything. Mo Hung had even specially allocated a personal workshop for Silin, so Silin basically only moved between the research division workshop, the training division, and the dormitory. Since he did not attend many classes and his appearance rate was low, Silin basically had no sense of existence to most of the students in Seven Lights. For the past few days, Mo Hung had told Silin a lot of things about machinery, and it had benefited him greatly. His overall accuracy had increased to 96%. Please do not underestimate this 1%. There were only a handful of people who could achieve a galaxy's overall accuracy of 97% like Mo Hung, and they were all famous authoritative figures like Mo Hung in the League of Stars. There were hundreds of people who knew about 96%, and there were even more people who had an overall accuracy of 95%, ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of people. The further one went, the harder it became to improve. Many people might not even be able to achieve a 1% increase after 95%, even if they worked their entire lives. Only those who could achieve a general accuracy of 99% could be considered a high-end talent. Those who could not reach this standard basically had no right to speak in this circle. The instructors in Seven Lights machinery field were all above 99%, and the grade instructors would achieve 96%. Therefore, Mo Hung was quite proud of Silin's improvement. He was proud of his wise decision to pull Silin over from the hands of those trash instructors, and he was even more proud of the fact that he finally had an excellent disciple. If those instructors knew that they were trash in Vice Headmaster Mo's heart, who knew if they would vomit blood in anger? There was one time when Silin went to look for Mo Hung, and Mo Hung was communicating with God knows who. He was so proud of himself that he was just short of cocking his tail. Mo Hung was very proud of his disciple, so he showed it by pinching Silin's face more and more often. Silin felt that his face was starting to grow fat. On this day, Silin was assembling the parts that Mo Hung had given him in the workshop. Mo Hung had gone on a business trip. The so-called business trip was to leave planet 7 luminaries, but no one knew where he went. However, before Mo Hung left, when he assigned a task to Silin, his face was glowing as if he was looking forward to something. The way he looked at Silin also became more and more kind, making Silin's hair stand on end. After interacting with Mo Hung for a long time, Silin also knew that when this minister showed this kind of smile, he was definitely thinking of some rotten idea in his heart. In fact, Mo Hung was visiting an old friend and showing off in passing. Silin's hand speed was very fast. There was a computer at the side that recorded the entire process and calculated the overall accuracy. Every time he assembled a complete machine, Silin had to write an assembly report and write down some of his ideas. This was something that Mo Hung had especially emphasized, and it was something that every person in the research division had to do. The people of the research division could not just blindly follow what others said. They had to have their own ideas. This was something that Mo Hung had said when he was the minister. Silin felt that he could increase his speed even further while maintaining his accuracy. Time was life. It was a very simple saying that even children would grow calluses from hearing it. However, as hunters roaming the galaxy, they all had a very high level of awareness, whether it was man-made or other accidents. If some important part of a warship malfunctioned and was not repaired, the hidden threat of everyone on the warship dying in less than a 10,000th of a second would constantly increase. This was not to say that Silin was very noble. Only those with ability would be quickly accepted by hunter regiments and be able to go further in the universe. For the Vanguard, and more so for himself, having this kind of awareness would give him a better chance of survival. After Sillin was done equipping the machine, he looked at the data on the recorder and picked up the report book to summarize. He wrote down his thoughts and experiences on it. It was at this moment the doorbell rang. Judging from the rhythm of the bell ringing, Celine had already guessed who it was. After the door opened, a head poked in. Seeing that Sillin was writing a report and not assembling the machine, a pair of bright eyes immediately curved into a smile. Good thing you didn't assemble the machine. I was afraid that I would disturb your work at this time. A beautiful girl with a naive smile walked in. It was the girl who had commented on Sillin and the others with Fu Luo on the teaching building. You came at the right time. I just finished assembling, said Sillin. This girl was also one of the research division's specially recruited students from the Design Institute. Her name was Ling Long, 16 years old, and she was also a first-year student. She seemed to have some background, but many people did not know what her background was. They only knew that many of the great instructors in the research division treated her well. After Sillin came to the research division, he ran into Ling Long by chance and was dragged away by her to ask about the battle between Sillin and Knight in the training room that day. Since then, Ling Long would come to Sillin whenever she was free. She said that the other people in the research division were boring, but she got along quite well with Sillin. At the time, Ling Long said this in the research division's cafeteria. Moreover, she did not lower her voice, so a bunch of people around them heard it and looked at Sillin with strange and ambiguous gazes. One was a famous elven beauty in the research division, and the other was the Chief Mo Hang's favorite student. They were a perfect match. Sillin only brushed off the ambiguous gazes with a smile. He knew very well that Ling Long might look very innocent, but she actually hid her true self very well. She was definitely not as naive as she appeared on the surface. Moreover, on the first day Sillin and Ling Long ate together in the cafeteria, and Mo Hong told him to keep his distance from Ling Long if possible. Sillin could also see that Mo Heng's attitude towards Ling Long was warm but distant. As for the reason, Mo Hong did not want to explain, and Sillin would not ask. Ling Long touched the machine that Sillin had just assembled. While curious about the machine that Sillin had assembled, she said, Sillin, someone's treating us to a meal at the Institute. It's a big shot. He just had a son and is preparing a big meal to celebrate. Everyone in the Institute can bring their friends. How about it? Do you want to go? Are you asking me to go and get free food? Sillin was still writing the report in his hand. He smiled. Ling Long looked at Sillin and blinked. It's not the first time anyway. Last time, someone from the Communications Institute treated us to a meal. Didn't we go and get free food too? Let's go. As she spoke, Ling Long elbowed Sillin. Sillin was about to speak when his communicator suddenly rang. I'm sorry. Excuse me for a moment. Sillin walked to a rest cubicle in the workshop. The people outside would not be able to hear their conversation here. The caller was Knight. Normally, Knight would not call during Sillin's working hours, but after seeing the IIT symbol on the display, Sillin immediately avoided Ling Long and answered the call indirectly. It meant urgent. What is it? Sillin said. Sillin, there's something to do. On the display, Knight looked very excited. After holding back for so long, he could finally go all out. Tell me. Sillin knew that a mission that could cause such a huge reaction from Knight must not be simple. Knight straightened his face and asked, Do you know about Seven Lights Asteroid Experimental Base? I do. There were a few asteroids not far away from Planet Seven Lights, and on them were the experimental bases built by Seven Lights. Each asteroid corresponded to an experimental base, and it was clear just how big Seven Lights' investment was. It was because some experiments were too dangerous to be carried out on Seven Lights, such as large-scale communication interference, high-risk biochemical virus experiments, large-scale radiological weapons research, and so on. That was why an extraterrestrial experimental base was built. Right now, C.I. Jinsheng was doing his research on one of the asteroids where a communication base was built. Something happened to the biochemical virus base. Uncle Hua did not explain the specifics. This is Seven Lights' top secret. This time, The people from the security team and the training division who were sent over from the military have joined the operation team. At first, Uncle Hua did not plan to allow students to participate, but after some students applied multiple times, he only allowed those with excellent results to join. The rest are off the table. There are only 4 grades in the military field, and there were no grades 5, 6, or 7. If one's results were good during the 4 years, they would be recommended into the military. Normally speaking, there were very few people like this. Come to think of it, there are 2 people from the 2nd grade, and 3 people from the 3rd and 4th grade respectively. Originally, none of us 1st graders were allowed to participate, and I couldn't change Uncle Hua's mind even after blocking him at his door for an entire day. It was only after I contacted my grandfather that he added my name into the operation team. As for that Pride kid, he can't do it. His family doesn't allow him to go. However, I'm sure the guy won't give up so easily. Right now, he's either trying to convince his 2nd brother Ji Fei Hong or find a way to contact his grandfather. Only these 2 people will agree to it. Knight said gloatingly. As the director of the training division, Huanil knew very well who Knight and Pride were. If the mission wasn't dangerous enough, Huanil would not be so resolute. So, Silin, are you interested in joining? Knight asked. Sure, I'm looking forward to it, Silin said with a smile. His hands were a little itchy after not moving for a long time. All right, I'll go tell Uncle Hua directly. You should come over immediately. There's a preliminary preparation before the operation. After ending the communication, Silin came out and smiled apologetically at Exquisite. Something came up. I can't go get free food. Exquisite's little nose wrinkled as she drew on the ground with the tip of her foot. All right, I'll go eat 2 portions myself. I'll be going first. After Exquisite left, Silin swiftly finished the report that he had almost finished writing and began to tidy up the things inside the workshop. 5 minutes later, he picked up his backpack and left on a hoverboard. In a room inside the research division, Exquisite watched Silin's back on the monitor as he hurriedly left on a hoverboard. She frowned. She turned on the communicator in her hand and dialed a number. The call was quickly connected. Exquisite's frown grew deeper and deeper as she listened to the report from the other side. Chapter 35. When Silin arrived at the training division, Knight had already told Huanil about Silin's participation. However, Huanil only allowed Silin to join the preliminary list. It wasn't just Silin. All 10 Seven Lights students had to go through the preliminary. If they couldn't pass, they couldn't participate in this operation. After all, they were just students and not soldiers. Their overall qualities must meet the standards. Normal test results and real battlefield results were different. While the 10 students know, 11 students were preparing for the preliminary test. Pride ran over with a communicator and passed it to Huanil excitedly. Huanil had a bad feeling at the time. He took the communicator and walked into the office to answer the call. After a while, he came out looking a little constipated. Looking at Pride, who was holding his chin up and criticizing Knight, Huanil felt that his future was bleak. And so, Pride joined in as well. The first event of the preliminary selection was shooting. This time, the guns that were given to everyone were different from the ones that were usually used in training. The bullets were slightly larger, and the speed at which they were shot was slightly slower. However, the target's movement speed was not slow, and it was very aggressive. Everyone was wearing protective clothing. There was a sensor on the preliminary protective clothing, and the maximum number shown on the sensor was 10. If the number dropped below 5 after shooting, they would be eliminated. Therefore, this preliminary test tested the students' shooting ability, reaction ability, adaptability, and so on. At the same time, the students also realized that this operation was different and vaguely guessed something. As long as there was fear in their hearts, they wouldn't be as calm and clean when responding. The effect of this kind of shooting was very obvious. The number of shots, hit rate, and the number of points deducted were all displayed on the screen outside the testing field. The soldiers of the training division and the police division who were getting ready could all see it. This was a group operation. Without a certain level of strength, the soldiers wouldn't acknowledge you. Forget about whether or not they would trust you with their backs. They wouldn't feel at ease even if they fought together. The 10 people were divided into 10 different parts of the testing field. The total number of targets in each place was 1,000, and the first to eliminate the targets within the specified time was considered the winner. Sillin was inside the testing field. He walked into the entrance after tidying up his equipment. The lighting inside the field was dim, and the environment simulation was a dark and damp atmosphere. He could clearly feel something stirring in the dark. Whoosh! A black shadow the size of a medium-sized dog rushed over. Sillin raised his gun, and with a bang, the black shadow shattered and disappeared. Then there were 2 more, then 4, then 8. After getting used to the speed of the bullets and the recoil of the guns, even though there were more and more targets, things were still going smoothly. The further he went, the more black shadows there were, and the stronger their attacks were. Several times they brushed past Sillin. Fortunately, Sillin reacted quickly, or else he would have been attacked. While dodging the sudden attacks, he also had to shoot at the targets. As long as he didn't let the targets approach in groups, there would be a gap to dodge. As long as there was such a gap, Sillin would be able to make the fastest and most convenient response. Strangely, Sillin's heart was strangely calm. There was no fear, no anxiety. It was as if he was eating a bowl of noodles. All he did was look at the noodles in the bowl, pick them up with his chopsticks, and eat them. That was all. At the same time, everyone had their own reactions to the 10 people's battle on the display outside the testing field. There were 2 students who were affected by the atmosphere inside the field when they entered, and a trace of fear grew in their hearts. Add to that the change in their guns and the miscalculation of the bullet speed, they didn't last long before they were attacked. 5 minutes later, the number on the protective suit sensor had dropped to 5, and it was still dropping. Quenil ordered his men to get the 2 people out immediately. There was no longer any need for them to continue. The 2 people who were eliminated not long after the preliminaries took off their protective helmets. Their faces were ashen and dejected. There were instructors guiding them from the side. As the test continued, another 3 people were eliminated, and only 5 people were left inside. The first person to eliminate all the targets within the given time was still Knight. Knight's expression was calm when he came out. He had been training like this since he was young, and he believed that Pride had done the same. That was why Knight only looked at Sillin's display after he came out. Pride also came out not long after Knight came out. Pride was a little unconvinced when he saw Knight, but he still raised his chin and snorted. Sillin was the 3rd person to come out. He had gathered all the data he needed, and he also predicted that Knight and Pride should have finished their tests and were waiting outside. That was why there was no need to drag things out any longer. He swiftly eliminated the last few dozen targets and walked out. Other than the 3 of them, there were 2 other students who made it past the allotted time. But at the very least, their protective suit points hadn't dropped below the passing line, so they were considered to have passed. Knight, Pride, and Sillin's results were excellent, and the other 2 students passed. After the preliminaries, the next test was the antibody and allergy test. The 5 students who passed the preliminaries were injected with a small amount of serum antibodies. As long as their bodies could accept it and didn't have an allergic reaction, they were considered to have passed and could board the transport together with the others who were ready to depart. It seemed that the targets they had to eliminate this time were not only highly offensive, but also poisonous. Sillin thought as he analyzed and injected the antibodies into his body. After the serum antibodies were injected, Sillin deduced the antigen based on the antibodies. Combining it with the environmental conditions of the test field and the relevant data of the target, Sillin was certain that the target this time was a rodent. What kind of rodent was a rodent that had high reproductive ability, preferred dark places, and was widely used in biochemical experiments? A rat. If it really was the size of the target in the test field, then Sillin had never seen such a big rat before. After the antibody and allergy test, the good news was that none of the 5 students were allergic. The situation was urgent, and there was no time to give the 5 students any other instructions. When all the equipment was ready, the 5 students had also finished their tests and were very reluctantly brought onto the transport by Quenil. The relevant matters would be explained on the warship. One transport after another transported the soldiers and students to the warship docked at the spaceport. When he saw the warship, Knight whistled, a military warship armed with heavy weapons and equipped with a high-end Sentinel defense system. It looks like the situation this time is pretty serious. But since we haven't mobilized any troops, it shouldn't be too serious, even if it's serious. After entering the warship, everyone on the warship, be it the operation members or the warship's pilot, were injected with more antibodies than the allergy test. After the injection, each member was even given 2 antibody serums. If the injected serum didn't work when the time came, the other 2 serums would be used. Chapter 36. While the warship was flying, when Neil began to introduce the mission, a 3-dimensional map of the planet was displayed on the huge screen, and the distribution of the base was displayed on it. Half a year ago, the biotech base discovered that one of the mice had gone missing when they were dealing with the failed and presumed dead mice. There was a hole in the sealed cabin, and no clues could be found even after much investigation. 20 days ago, an abnormal situation occurred at the waste treatment plant on the other side of the planet. 3 workers went missing, and there were bloody pieces of work clothes and claw marks on a few instruments. Similar situations often occurred around the treatment plant in the following period of time. 10 days ago, the base sent out a patrol squad to investigate. Half a day later, the entire squad's vital signals disappeared one after another. Communication was fruitless. Neil switched images. The image was of a black mouse that was half a meter long, not counting its tail. He continued. After that, the patrol squad was mobilized in large numbers and found the cause 3 days ago. It was this black mouse that caused the current dire situation. Through Neil's introduction, everyone learned that these black mice had very strong vitality. In the base, the confirmation of Mouse's death was very strict. There was a time limit, and it could only be confirmed dead if there were no signs of life for 24 hours. Moreover, it was sealed at super low temperatures while being sent to the treatment plant. Normally speaking, even a living mouse would freeze to death at -80 degrees. They also had to go through another vital signs inspection to ensure that there were no mistakes. However, that lab mouse managed to bite through the sealed cabin and escape successfully. It was obvious how strong these mutated mice were. The black mouse that escaped back then had been experimented on with strengthening drugs and had mutated during ultraviolet sterilization and super low temperature transportation. After it escaped the base, it endured the magnetic force and radiation outside and mutated once more, becoming what it was today. Under the great sacrifice of the base's patrol squad, we finally brought back a living, immature black mouse. The antiserum you injected was provided by the base personnel, but these black mice mutate very quickly. I don't know how effective the antiserum will be when the time comes, so I'll give everyone a heads up here. Don't think that you're not afraid just because you've been injected with the antiserum, Neil said seriously. After the introduction, Neil divided the 5,000 operatives into 10 teams. The 5 students were inserted into 5 of the teams. Pride and Knight's team captains were Gerard and Neil respectively. These 2 were personally led by the heads of the security team and training division. He couldn't be at ease leaving them to someone else. Sillin was assigned to the 7th team. Everyone tidied up their equipment and gathered together in an hour. The 5 students put their equipment together, and while they were organizing their equipment, they chatted about their thoughts. Hard was one of the 2 who had passed the preliminary test. He was a forthright person and soon started chatting with Knight. There was only one lab rat that escaped. How did it develop into a large-scale rat infestation? Hard said. Neil had also mentioned this question before, but the answer remained unanswered even now. So now everyone was just guessing. He went out to look for a female rat. Serd, the last of the 5, said. Serd might not be as forthright and straightforward as Hard, but he was still a straightforward person. He was Hard's childhood friend, and his father served in the military of one of the 10 trade sectors. Bulsh ***, there are no living things outside the base. The magnetic field effect is strong, and there's also radiation. Even if there are creatures, they would have been cleaned up during the construction of the base. Knight said as he put on his combat uniform. In that case, our target is very difficult to deal with. Serd sighed. Don't go if you're afraid of death. Pride said with disdain. Serd didn't mind either. After being in the training division for so long, everyone knew this little young master's temper. "What do you think, Scylla?" Knight asked. Scylla adjusted the tools in the backpack at his waist. The magnetic field on many asteroids was unstable, and subspace containers were unusable. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to carry them. "What do I think? I don't have any, but I do have some suggestions." "Oh, tell me," Knight said curiously. "Don't think about how many mutated black rats we're going to kill, but how we're going to retreat in one piece." Before Scylla could finish, Pride snorted disdainfully. "Coward. All right, I'm a coward. I don't want to become the shit of those black, mutated things. Just like those workers at the waste treatment plant." In the end, only a few bloody rags were left behind, and even their bones were dragged away to feed their descendants. "Don't be an alarmist," Pride roared. It had to be said that Scylla's words did make their hair stand on end. "Heh. Actually, it's fine as long as we get rid of them. We have weapons in our hands." Surd raised the gun in his hand. "No, I just think that the situation might be much more serious than we imagined. The Black Rat's group attacks might be even more concentrated than during our primary test. Also, they're intelligent, and they don't just move according to a set program. They have teeth that can bite through sealed lab cabins and sharp claws. Moreover, their saliva is poisonous, and they carry animal viruses on the surface of their bodies," Scylla said solemnly. This wasn't Scylla exaggerating, but obtained through analysis. Scylla had even taken into account the radiation energy of the asteroids and many other parameters to analyze the mutated frequency of the black rats. But looking at the members of this operation, as long as the drugs on the bullets were effective and the mutated black rats were eliminated thoroughly enough, they should be able to handle it. The reason why the guns were different, the reason why the bullets were bigger, heavier, and slower than the training guns was because every bullet was specially made and contained drugs. The bullets would explode when they entered the mutated black rats' bodies, and the drugs would quickly and thoroughly kill them once they spread out. At the same time, the drugs could also be sprinkled on the mutated black rats around them to reduce their mobility. Pride still wore a look of disdain on his face, but he had already memorized Scylla's suggestion in his mind. Who would go against their own life? He didn't want to become the shit of those black and swarthy things. After the warship arrived outside the asteroid and docked with the space station, Juanil and Gerard led a few people to further understand the situation. The rest of the personnel were on standby. It didn't take long before Juanil and Gerard came over solemnly. They explained the new information they had just received to everyone. An hour ago, the black rats had attacked the base from underground. Only the center of the base was the sturdiest underground, and it would take some time before they could break through this layer of defense. However, there wasn't much time left for everyone. Many of the base's flight and communication equipment had been gnawed away. Right now, there were several hundred researchers trapped in the base's center, and a dozen of them were heavily injured. The few antiserum they had injected into their bodies were completely ineffective, and the Central Lab was currently preparing the corresponding antiserum. But no one dared to imagine how many more unknown toxins were waiting behind. As for the edge of the base, it had already fallen. Team 1 to 8 will be responsible for cleaning, starting from the area around the base's center. Team 9 will be responsible for protecting the engineers and repairing the base's defense system. Team 10 will assist the trapped researchers in escaping. Medical backup. Juanil swiftly issued one order after another. He only arranged the work of each team. As for how each team was arranged, he believed that his men would not disappoint him. In truth, Juanil really wanted to arrange Knight and Pride into the last two teams, but he also knew that the two ancestors probably wouldn't listen to such an arrangement. The seventh team Scylla was divided into 5 teams by the captain. Each team had 100 people, and each team was further divided into 10 smaller teams, advancing as a unit. The first 8 teams of the 10 teams went first, and the 8 armed carriers landed around the base's center in 8 different directions. Chapter 37. While on the aircraft, Scylla had seen the scene below on the display screen. There were many mutated black mice crawling on the surface of the base, and more were crawling out of the base one after another. These black mice came in all shapes and sizes. The smallest was only about 20 centimeters long, while the bigger ones were more than a meter long, not including the length of their tails. After approaching the center of the base, the aircraft slowly descended. The black mice below weren't afraid of the arrival of the aircraft, but instead became even more excited, as if they had seen food. Since there were many places in the base that couldn't be detected by the detectors, they couldn't predict how many black mice there were below. However, looking down from the aircraft, all they could see were dense black dots. In just half a year, a single mouse had grown into such a large number. It was clear that the speed of their reproduction wasn't something normal mice could compare to. The base's isolation layer has been activated. We can begin operation. Over. Roger. Over. Shoot. The captain of his 7th squad switched the number on his communicator. All squads, get ready. 10-second countdown for the infrasonic weapon begins. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. The sound waves that human ears couldn't hear were emitted from the aircraft, and the originally excited and lively mutated black mice suddenly became restless. The faster ones had already begun to flee, while the slower ones were becoming slower and slower. This was an infrasonic weapon made according to the natural frequency of the black mouse's internal organs provided by the research base. Although it was effective, it wasn't as good as expected. However, at least it was effective. After the infrasonic attack stopped, the number of black mice around the center of the base had decreased significantly. The mutated black mice that remained there were still a little sluggish, and their consciousness was hazy. Taking advantage of this gap, ropes were lowered from the aircraft parked at low altitudes. Operatives wearing combat uniforms and carrying guns followed the ropes and landed on the ground. The 10 members of the team quickly formed a formation and began to deal with the target as they advanced forward. The flying bullets pierced through the air at high speed and exploded inside the mutated black mouse's body, blasting its internal organs to pieces. A large hole appeared on the half-meter-long mutated black mouse's body, and it fell to the ground dead without even twitching. Its black fur and red blood began to dehydrate under the effects of the drugs carried by the bullets. In less than a minute, the entire mutated black mouse had turned into a pile of powder. Sillin had been assigned to Shoot Squad, the captain of the 7th squad, probably to take care of him as a student. However, a warrior was not a babysitter. Shoot did not expect Sillin to achieve anything, but at least he had to have the ability to protect himself. In a 10-man formation, Sillin was in a relatively safe position. He was the backup support, but it didn't take long for the others to realize that this teenage student was definitely a ruthless one. Sillin's firing speed was very fast. By the time the others had fired their first 2 shots, Sillin had already fired his 3rd shot. Moreover, he had fired all 3 shots consecutively, and all of them had hit their targets. Most importantly, the black mice that he had killed were all relatively large and fast-mutated black mice. This was enough to raise eyebrows. In the time it took for a squad member to reload, Sillin had practically taken over all the firepower support and support from the other squad members. The squad members didn't even notice when Sillin had reloaded. They only heard the continuous gunshots. With this kind of firing speed, not to mention the endurance of the body, it didn't even have the time to aim, right? Since a student could perform as well as a warrior, Sillin was quickly accepted by the squad. The others also began to relax and focus on their own attacks. With their comrades behind them and this very capable kid, they didn't have to worry about anything. At the space station outside the asteroid, a man wearing a military uniform with a lieutenant general epaulet stood in the command room and watched the cleanup of the base displayed on the screen. He was sent here by Marshal Fiegler, and he had even received a communication from a certain political figure in the League of Stars before he departed. It could be said that he was shouldering a heavy responsibility, and both Knight and Pride squads have been specially assigned personnel to ensure the safety of the 2 young masters. This could be considered a special privilege, and he wouldn't say it even if he had any thoughts. That being said, the trip this time could be considered fruitful. The other 3 students Neil mentioned had performed pretty well, especially that kid named Sillin. He wasn't any worse than the few influential figures in Sector C's military academies. At the moment, the lieutenant general didn't seem to notice much change in Silen's emotions. He cooperated well enough, was calm enough, decisive enough, and accurate enough. Looking at the screen, the lieutenant general wondered if he could recruit this kid into his unit after this operation. It would be a waste of talent to leave him in 7 lights. As they continued to advance and entered the interior of the base, their movements were slightly obstructed. The cables were damaged, the generators were nowhere to be found, the energy system was malfunctioning, the energy box was unusable, and the places without windows were pitch black. Moreover, there were many places in the base's internal laboratories that were resistant to infrared and X-ray detection. In order to ensure that every laboratory was cleaned up, the operatives would throw powerful grenades, rodent repellent bombs, and other things into the laboratories to force the black mice out, and every single one of them would jump out. As the cleanup progressed, the black mice seemed to have sensed the threat from the base and escaped. This was just what everyone wanted. If they could drive these mutated black mice out of the base and into the open space outside the base, then the armed space planes in the air could use their high-energy weapons to clean them up on a large scale. This was because the base they had built with great difficulty must not be destroyed by high-energy weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Occasionally, a few caves could be seen inside the base. Those mutated black mice were attacking the base from underground. A lot of robots had been sent to scout the area and spray chemicals at the same time to force the mutated black mice out of the ground. After this battle, they believed that the underground construction of the base would advance one step further. After a period of time, the number of black mice inside the base had decreased by a lot. Everywhere the operation squad passed by was covered in gray powder. That was the mutated black mice that had been killed by bullets and turned into powder by the drugs. Silen's senses were very strong. He could sense the 3 mutated black mice behind the experiment table, even without looking. The moment they popped their heads out, the bullets that came flying at them would blow off their heads directly. Perhaps it would be difficult for other operatives to see in such a dark environment, but not Silen. There were a few times when Silen had fired his gun before his squad members could even react, and the sound of the bullets hitting the black mice echoed with the gunshot. After he finished inspecting the abnormal life forms in this area, Shoot smiled and said, "Done. Captain, this is already the edge of the base, isn't it?" A squad member asked. Although Shoot was also the leader of this squad, the squad members were still used to calling him Captain. Almost there. We've already started cleaning up the high-energy weapons outside the base. The rest should be easier. Shoot's tone was relatively relaxed. He looked at Silen, who was repairing the circuit board of an instrument, and said, "Silen is pretty good." "Yeah, we're all a little ashamed of ourselves," a squad member said with a smile. Silen didn't say anything and focused on the work at hand. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. According to his predictions, those black mice shouldn't just be like this. Chapter 38. Shoot did not say anything about Silen's silence. Silen had not spoken much since the beginning of the operation. He just thought that the child was too quiet. Young people should be more lively and cheerful. "Silen, don't worry about that for now. Once we're done with those black mice, there will be specialists who will come and repair the base. We should head to the waste treatment plant on the other side. That's their nest." Shoot looked at the time and said, "Wait, it's done." Silen turned on the instrument and inputted a series of commands. "What is this?" one of the squad members asked. The words on the instrument had been ground away by the black mice and could not be read clearly. "This should be an instrument that analyzes genes or something." Another squad member said, This is a relatively high-end analyzer in the League of Stars right now." Silen took out a small syringe from his waist pocket and dripped it onto a notch on the instrument. Then he pushed the notch into the bayonet and inputted a series of formulas on it again. "See, I told you to read more so that you'll know something about any instrument you come across in the future. Otherwise, people will call you illiterate. TCH, I'm a soldier. A soldier only needs to know how to fight. What I need to be educated for." The squad members laughed and chatted. However, Shoot did not laugh. Silen's reaction gave him a bad feeling. He had heard from Hoyneal that Sillin was a very talented person who worked in Seven Lights Research Division a long time ago. Now, it would seem that this kid was truly talented. It took him less than 5 minutes to repair this instrument. His skills were very experienced. However, the blood that Sillin dripped on the instrument should be the black mice's blood, right? What did he do it? How is it? Shoot moved closer and asked. It was because he could not understand the profound things displayed on the screen at all. As expected, being uneducated was a terrible thing. However, just like his subordinates said, soldiers only needed to know how to fight. Their brain memory was limited, and their CPU could not keep up with too many things. Sillin did not answer Shoot's question directly. Instead, he said, "Captain, do me a favor and collect the black mice's blood left in the lab. Try to make it as fresh as possible." Some of the spots were bloodstains left behind by the black mice when they were fighting or when they were injured by the laboratory's defense system. As long as they didn't come into contact with drugs, there wouldn't be too many changes. Sure. Shu took a small bag of tubes from Sillin. Each tube contained a sterile cotton swab. Who would have thought that this kid would even bring this thing with him when he was preparing his equipment on the warship? Before long, the 9 of them had gathered 28 blood samples. Sillin found a few solutions in the laboratory. After processing them, he put all 28 of them together and analyzed them at the same time. Looking at the series of data displayed on the screen, he sighed. "Wait for me. I'll go collect another sample. Hopefully, I can find it." "Hey, what's that kid doing?" a team member complained. "I have a bad feeling about this," another person muttered. Sillin looked at a cave entrance, took a few photos, and then jumped into the cave. "Hey, you." The team member who had followed him over almost had his hair stand on end. That was a rat cave. They couldn't even stretch their fists and legs inside, much less raise their guns. If a black mouse suddenly jumped out from below, they would definitely be waiting for death. Although the vitality detector didn't detect anything, there were too many interference factors in this kind of experimental base. It was common for the detector to malfunction. It was pitch black inside the cave, and the people above could not see what Sillin was doing. Sillin took off his gloves and placed his hand directly on the cave wall. The virus carried by the black mice had no effect on him. When he touched the cave wall, Sillin's mind had already begun to rapidly analyze the information his fingers had come into contact with. The DNA analysis of the tiny hairs, dander, saliva, and other traces left on the cave wall was about the same as the data on the detector. His fingers moved along the cave wall and suddenly paused when they reached a certain spot. Sillin put on his gloves again, took out the cotton swab inside the small tube, and wiped it over that spot. At the same time, he used a carving knife to scrape off a layer there. Shoot and the others finally let out a sigh of relief when they saw Sillin come out of the cave. This kid is really, after the sample taken from the cave was analyzed on the detector and compared with the 20 or so samples from before, a series of data was displayed on the screen. "It's just as I expected." Sillin pointed at the data displayed on the screen and said to everyone, "This is the comparison between the sample I collected from the cave and the 20 or so samples you collected. Some of the data was deduced based on the analysis of genetic material. I won't say much else. In short, we've been tricked." Shoot frowned. "Explanation. I'll only say one thing." Sillin pointed at a piece of data. "The strength of the red and white muscles of the black mice we hunted was at least 5 times weaker than the black mouse that dug the hole. In other words, the black mouse that dug the hole was much stronger than the black mice we encountered, be it in terms of speed or endurance. And this is just an incomplete analysis. The black mouse that dug the hole was a stronger type of black mouse." Shoot asked. "Yes, because the black mice we killed couldn't even scratch through the reinforced protective belt beneath the base. I've checked the holes, and the claw marks on the holes were very clean. They could even scratch through steel plates. If it were the black mice we encountered, they might not be able to dig through it, even if we gave them a month." "But how long has it been since the hole in the base was dug?" The squad members were silent. "Yes, how long has it been since the base was attacked?" "A few hours." "Where are the stronger black mice? The waste treatment plant?" "No, if my guess is correct, their true elites are right below the central area of the base." Shoot was shocked. How was that possible? aren't they? Shoot originally wanted to say that these black mice couldn't dig through the underground protective layer of the central area, right? But Shoot immediately realized that they might have been wrong from the start. It wasn't that they couldn't dig through. Since there were such strong black mice, no matter how sturdy the underground of the central area was, it wouldn't be able to hold out for long. What are they trying to do? A squad member couldn't help but ask. Revenge. They want revenge. Sillin looked in the direction of the central area. The core researchers of the base were there. The black mice that had been killed were only the vanguard of the black mice. The true elites had yet to show themselves. Sillin even suspected that the black mouse captured by the research base was purposely captured by the black mice's leader. That was because it wasn't elite either. Compared to the one that dug the hole, it wasn't on the same level at all. The waste treatment plant used to be their nest because there was water and food there. But now, that place was nothing more than a cover for the operation team to continue wasting ammunition and time. They were very good at making a feint in the east and attacking in the west. In this world, there were far more intelligent races than people could imagine. Why didn't you say anything if you'd expected it? A squad member said angrily. Say, would you have believed me if I said it without evidence? With Sillin's status as a student, neither the military personnel nor the researchers of the base would believe him. Since that was the case, he might as well find evidence first. Sillin admitted that he wasn't a benevolent person. He wouldn't do something like being snubbed if he showed kindness to others. The lives and deaths of those people had nothing to do with him. If Mo Hung knew what Sillin was thinking, he would probably be so angry that he'd give him a good beating. Chapter 39. After listening to Sillin's words, Shoot dialed the communicator and said a few words before passing it to Sillin. You can talk to Boswa. Sillin took the communicator and explained the current situation to Huanil. He also sent over a series of data analyzed by the apparatus. The evidence was convincing enough. Keep all the blood and other samples you've collected. I'll send someone over to collect them. I'll have the other teams collect more samples as well. Huanil also realized the severity of the situation after listening to Sillin's report and told Sillin some things that needed attention. All right, I got it. We'll pay attention. Sillin suddenly paused while talking to Huanil. He swiftly turned around, raised his gun, and fired 2 consecutive shots. There was no hesitation or time to aim at all. Everything was done in one go. Bang! Bang! On the other side, Shoot was still talking to his squad members. He had already realized the danger when Sillin raised his gun, but before he could react, Sillin's 2 bullets had flown over. The bullet swept past the tip of Shoot's hair beside his ear. He could still feel the heat from the bomb flying past his face, as well as the burning smell of his hair left in the air by the bullet flying at high speed. It was a black mouse about 2 meters long, excluding its tail. When the first shot hit it, the bullet had only exploded in a small area on its body, and the drugs hadn't quickly permeated its entire body. Therefore, if the second bullet hadn't come right after, it still had the strength to rip Shoot's back in half with a single swipe of its claws. The black mouse that had taken 2 bullets fell to the ground and twitched. Its blade-like claws left a few deep claw marks on the ground. It was obvious that they were much more resistant to the drugs and the bullets than the black mice before them. Before the blood had completely turned to powder, Sillin quickly took out a syringe and sucked a bit of the blood on the ground. He put it into a small tube filled with neutralizer and anticoagulant. Under everyone's shocked gazes, he even dug out a piece of the big black mouse's flesh and soaked it in the bag filled with neutralizer. The squad members felt a chill run down their backs. They didn't know if it was because of the black mice or Sillin. Didn't this kid know how to do something that made people feel at ease? The black mouse was still twitching and hadn't stopped breathing, but this brat ran over to take its blood and dig out its flesh. Wasn't he afraid that the black mouse would strike again before it died? The black mouse's eyes, which were so red that they seemed to be filled with blood, gradually dimmed and turned black. Finally, it stopped breathing and slowly turned into powder. However, the sharp claws were still intact. "Thank you," Shoot said after coming back to his senses. Although he had been talking to his team members, he was still on guard. No one had noticed the big black mouse's approach, and he himself only realized the danger when Sillin raised his gun. Although Shoot's back was facing the black mouse, he could still sense that the black mouse was charging at him. It was several times faster than the black mice in front of it, and it was also silent. By the time he noticed it, it was already too late. Huanil's communicator was still on, and from the video settings on the communicator, Huanil had already seen the scene just now. There was no need for further proof. Huanil had truly witnessed the slightly stronger black mice Sillin spoke of. If all the black mice under the base were like this, then the consequences would truly be unimaginable. If it wasn't for Sillin's reminder, the hidden black mouse elites would have taken the opportunity to kill off the research center and the last two teams who went to rescue them while all of their personnel were encircling the mouse nest at the waste treatment plant. He picked up the undamaged black mouse's claw and slashed it across the lab table beside him. The hardened surface of the claw was easily cut open. "Holy shit, this thing is so powerful!" a team member exclaimed in surprise. This had completely exceeded their predictions. This big black mouse is probably here to patrol and see if the other teams have left. After all, the other teams should have left the base and were preparing to head to the waste treatment plant by now, but we're still here. Sillin voiced his speculation. Moreover, the fact that this black mouse could come over safely meant that it wasn't afraid of the rat poison sprayed in the underground tunnel at all. I've already ordered 6 teams to return. I'll leave 2 teams and the weaponized space plane there. If they can't handle it, I'll just have the weaponized space plane flatten that area with its high-energy cannons. Right now, Huanil didn't have the heart to care about the waste treatment plant anymore. The moment he thought of Sillin's words, he became restless. On the other side, Huanil urgently stopped the 10th squad who was preparing to open the protective shield at the center of the base. At the same time, the engineers who were repairing power supplies and other important equipment under the 9th Squad's protection were hastily brought back to the spaceplane. The base was too dangerous. The samples and data Sillin had submitted were immediately processed. Then, Huanil gave every team leader a new order to send another machine into the underground tunnel to expand the size of the tunnel. Otherwise, the soldiers wouldn't even be able to move after they went down and would only become food. But strangely, the deeper they went, the bigger the hole became. There was no need for machines to expand the hole at all. When the machines reached a certain depth, they were clawed and destroyed by the black mice below. But before the machines were destroyed, the detection devices on the machines showed that there were a large number of abnormal life forms below. This confirmed Sillin's speculation. However, another question was raised. Why were the holes below so big? Didn't this mean that there were even bigger black mice? There was no conclusion to this question for now. Maybe it was because they had realized something, but the black mice hiding deep below the base had begun to move earlier. Of the 8 squads, some went underground, and some stayed behind at various parts of the base. Because when Neil had told them to, every operative fired at least 2 shots at the black mice that crawled out of the hole. Other than the holes that had already been opened in the base, the group of big black mice had opened many more holes away from the operatives' firepower when they charged towards the surface. They were like a group of mad Avengers who didn't care about their own lives at all and only charged towards the center of the base. Since these big black mice were very fast and had very sensitive senses, there was no doubt that the operative's hit rate had been lowered. Moreover, the operative had to change locations from time to time because there was no telling if a big black mouse would suddenly jump out of the ground if they stayed there. There were already a few people who had been dragged into the hole by the big black mice that had suddenly charged out. They didn't even have the time to scream. Sillin's squad went underground. The hole was very dark, but their masks were equipped with night vision devices. After all, there weren't as many jamming devices underground as there were inside the base. The cooperation between the squad members was very good, and there were no casualties for the time being. The firepower was more concentrated inside the underground hole. As they went deeper, the hole grew bigger, and 3 people could walk side by side now. At a fork, the group saw a pool of blood. It wasn't the black mice's, it was human blood. At the same time, they heard a weak cry for help. Chapter 40. There weren't many messy marks around the bloodstains, which meant that there hadn't been an intense battle, but it also meant that those people hadn't been able to put up much of a fight against the attack. Shoot gestured with his hand. Stay alert, cover, and move to the other side to rescue them. Scylla crouched down against the wall, took out a small box, and scraped a layer of soil off the wall. The squad members saw Scylla's actions, but didn't pay attention to him. They only looked around vigilantly. After all, Scylla had done this before, so everyone thought that Scylla was taking samples. In truth, what they didn't know was that Scylla's real goal wasn't to take samples, but to use this as a cover. He pulled his finger out of the glove at an angle that no one would notice and touched the wall and the floor to analyze the minute traces. Even the most advanced equipment wasn't as convenient as the chip in Scylla's body. The moment he touched it, the feedback from his finger allowed Scylla to know what kind of black mice had attacked the operatives here. It was different. It was different from the big black mice that dug holes he had encountered before. It was stronger. Scylla wasn't sure how strong it was, but he had a feeling that those people had encountered the leader of these black mice, which was the mutated black mouse that had escaped from the base. When Shoot found the member who had called for help, he was already on the verge of death and had fallen into a deep coma. Under the illumination of the flashlight, everyone could clearly see that one of the member's legs had been bitten off and his body was covered in blood. The medic in charge of the squad came over to help him stop the bleeding, but before he could finish bandaging the wound, he had already passed away. "I'm going to kill those bastards." One of the squad members' eyes were bloodshot, and he punched the wall in grief and indignation. The others had similar expressions. Shu took a deep breath and said, "They're showing off." They could have gotten rid of everyone without a sound, but they just had to leave one heavily injured. He lost too much blood, and the rat poison has already invaded his internal organs. The medic picked up 2 empty tubes. "We've already injected the antiserum into both tubes, but it didn't have any effect. This rat poison is too strong. Captain, there's no signal on the communicator." One of the squad members suddenly shouted. Originally, he wanted to contact the reserve team and report the current situation at the same time, but he did not expect that there would be no signal at all. Every team brought a signal receiver with them when they entered the cave. Every time they reached a certain distance, they would install a receiver on the walls or ceiling of the cave as a disguise. The signal was quite strong just now, but now there was no signal at all. What had happened? Scylla thought to himself. Their intelligence. No, it should be said that their intelligence far exceeded people's expectations. If every team had done their job properly, and the signal receiver had been installed and concealed, but there was still no signal, then either the receiver had broken down on its own, or the black rat leader had dismantled the receiver. The former was unlikely, but the latter was very likely. It sounded incredible. Even if Scylla said it, not many people would believe it. How could a disguised signal receiver be removed? And to tear them all down so thoroughly? Was this a rat or a human? Scylla had never underestimated the black rat leader from the start. The more information he came into contact with, the more Scylla felt that this black rat was very powerful, be it in terms of intelligence or combat ability. Moreover, Scylla was gradually finding the frequency of that sound. Shoot thought for a moment, then took out his sound wave detector and pressed it. The reason why he had not used it earlier was because there was a high chance that the black rats would know their location when they used the sound wave detector. But now, Shoot couldn't care less. He kept feeling that something was wrong. Looking at the image displayed on the detector, Shoot's expression changed abruptly. "Get out of here quickly." They had only taken a few steps when the walls and ceiling of the cave were drilled through, and the black rats rushed over one by one. These black rats had appeared in a very coincidental position, separating Scylla and another squad member from the other 8 people in the same squad. Due to the increasing number of black rats, even if Shoot wanted to rescue them, there was nothing he could do. The distance between the two parties was pushed further and further by the black rats. Gunshots rang out incessantly, but these large black rats were not as easy to deal with as the small black rats from before. They were very oppressive. Scylla and the other squad member quickly retreated to the other side of the cave, their guns never stopping. But fortunately, the number of black rats that had appeared was not too high. Scylla and the other squad member fought for more than 10 minutes, and no more black rats came after them. The 2 of them stayed in another cave. They had lost contact with the other 8 people in their squad, and they did not run into any members of the other squads either. Only the sound of their breathing could be heard in the quiet cave. "Looks like we're safe for now." The man smiled. "Yeah." Scylla smiled as well. An arrow of blood shot out from the side of the man's neck. The man's eyes were filled with disbelief. He really did not expect Scylla to act so quickly. How can a normal person be on guard against a teammate in a situation like this? When the man said, "We're safe for now," a normal person would let out a temporary sigh of relief and relax their tension, much less when their teammate was right beside them. However, the man's carotid artery was cut by Scylla just as he took out his knife. Due to the intense rat extermination exercise just now, his blood flowed quickly, and it did not take long for him to stop breathing due to excessive blood loss. Scylla played with the rat claw in his hand and looked at the man on the ground. He let out a few almost inaudible sounds from his mouth. This was the first time Scylla had used it after decoding the black rat leader's voice frequency. Scylla had been searching for that voice and decoding it ever since he entered this network of deep underground caves. Scylla did not linger any longer and left the place. In less than a minute, a couple of black rats would come over and eat that squad member. In a situation like this, Scylla would be able to deal with the few threats hidden in the operation team better if he was alone. Ever since he entered Seven Lights, Scylla had never overlooked these hidden dangers. Whether it was a student, a researcher, or a soldier, Scylla had never let his guard down. Aflon's opponents had actually extended their hands into the military. How interesting, as expected of Aflon's opponents. Scylla's performance was very eye-catching when the group had just come down from the armed space plane to kill the black rats. But no one would have thought that Scylla was also paying attention to the minute changes in every squad member. From these minute changes, Scylla was able to guess the hidden dangers. Scylla was able to confirm his suspicions through the series of events that followed. In truth, before the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people in the group, Scylla had purposely walked a little slower. That person was obviously looking for an opportunity to kill Scylla as well. The duo were at the back of the group, and Scylla had calculated where the black rats would appear. Scylla's speed and the distance between him and the 8 people in front of him were all within his calculations. It might seem like a coincidence that the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people, but it was all within Scylla's calculations. Scylla did not need a sound wave detector to detect the sound waves coming from the cave walls. A normal person would not be able to sense it at all. Scylla was like a multifunctional precision instrument that was analyzing the information around him at all times. He knew that the black rat's arrival was not a coincidence, but the result of the black rat leader's command. Like a human-shaped detector, Scylla knew everything that was going on around him like the back of his hand. How many people in the group had just passed through which cave, how many black rats were at which cave entrance nearby, and so on. He knew all of this, which allowed Scylla to avoid a lot of trouble. Looking at the buckle of his backpack, the corner of Scylla's mouth curled up slightly. The next one should be appearing soon. In front of him was a corner of a cave entrance. Scylla slowly walked over, and just as he was about to reach the turning point, the rat claw in his hand shot out like lightning. At the corner, a person wearing a combat suit had his throat pierced and was directly nailed to the cave wall. His eyes were also filled with disbelief, and the gun in his hand fell to the ground. This was originally meant to kill Scylla. The rat claw's trajectory was in an arc, not to mention that it was so accurate in an environment like this inside a cave. This was something that the person had not expected. Scylla pulled out the rat claw, and just like before, it let out a sound that was difficult for human ears to distinguish. In the following period of time, Scylla took care of 3 more people. There was a mini tracking device at the buckle of Scylla's backpack. This was installed in the backpack before the equipment was distributed, and it was specially sent to Scylla. It was obvious that they had long since prepared to find an opportunity to kill Scylla here. However, they did not know that Scylla had already detected the tampering on the backpack when he received it. This was the so-called beat them at their own game. After walking in the network of caves for so long, Scylla could already clearly feel the number of black rats decreasing. Since Scylla had provided blood samples and related data in a timely manner, The operatives were able to make adequate preparations, reduce casualties, and improve efficiency. As Sillin walked, he suddenly stopped and turned around. In the darkness, on the other side of the cave, a large black rat nearly 3 meters tall stood there, its red eyes emitting a bloody glow in the darkness. "You finally appeared. I thought you'd keep hiding from me." There was a hint of a smile in Sillin's tone. "That thing inside your body, I want it." Chapter 41. Sillin had always suspected that the black rat leader had something on its body that could cause it to undergo such a change. Mutation was one thing, but there would be a period of stability after the mutation. However, this black rat had undergone a second mutation not long after its first mutation, and it had mutated so successfully that its intelligence and combat power seemed to have been accumulated over hundreds of years. He had never heard of such a thing before. A rat that was still strong for hundreds of years, or a 1-year-old rat? Who was more intelligent? The answer was obvious. When Sillin was examining the traces left behind by the black mouse, he discovered that there was a strange substance inside its cells. In other words, there might be something inside the black mouse's body that stimulated the cells of every part of the black mouse's body to produce strengthening substances. It wasn't until this black rat appeared that Sillin could clearly feel the special information coming from its body. That information made the chip in Sillin's body very excited, as if it had found its own kind. The huge black rat leader had 2 pairs of incisors that looked like scythes, and it let out a hissing sound that didn't sound like that of a rat. It had sensed Sillin's presence before, but it didn't attack immediately. It felt that this human gave it a very special feeling, a faint sense of danger, but at the same time, there was a temptation like a delicious meal. Perhaps eating this human would be good for its evolution. After enduring for so long, it finally decided to make its move. The black rat disappeared from where it was, and the next moment, it appeared in front of Sillin. Sillin's reaction wasn't slow either. He had already put his gun and backpack aside, and he faced it with his bare hands. His solidified body collided with the black rat with a dull thud. The instant the black rat's claws swept past, Sillin quickly bounced up and kicked the black rat's neck. Bang! The black rat's neck didn't break, but its head and upper body were knocked to the side by the force of the kick. The stone wall where it was hit caved in, and crushed rock fragments fell to the ground. The rock wall was like tofu under the black rat's claws, and the hole expanded under the black rat's continuous attacks, and stone fragments flew everywhere. After so many encounters, Sillin already knew the location of that thing in the black rat's body. Whoosh! 2 rat claws swung towards Heishu's blood-red eyes. Heishu closed his eyes and slightly tilted his head. The 2 rat claws that were thrown by Sillin hit the corner of Heishu's eyes, but they didn't even leave a scratch on Heishu's skin. However, the rat's claw that was thrown out as a hidden weapon was only a cover. Sillin's next target was its ear. The second black mouse closed its eyes. Sillin swung his claws at the same time and aimed them at the left and right ears of the mouse. With such speed and strength, if it really shot into the ear, no matter how hard the earlobe was, the inner ear and nerves deep inside the ear canal would be damaged. The big black mouse also knew the consequences of being shot, so it closed its eyes and leaned to the side to avoid the first 2 mouse claws. At the same time, the black mouse raised its 2 front limbs and used its sharp claws to deflect the incoming hidden weapons. This was the moment. Sillin jumped diagonally and flew under Heishu's front paws. His solidified arm pierced through its abdomen. At the same time, his arm sucked the thing out of Heishu's abdomen like a magnet. Then, he quickly jumped away. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. It was a white crystal ball the size of a fist. It was suffused with a dense white light in the darkness. Holding the white ball in his hand, Sillin could clearly feel the enormous energy coming from it. However, now was not the time to study this white ball. Sillin quickly retreated after obtaining the thing. Only an idiot would fight this big guy head-on. The wound on Heishu's abdomen caused by Sillin's arm didn't bleed much. Instead, it immediately began to heal. However, the healing effect wasn't as good as when the white ball was around. The healing speed was slightly slower. Heishu went berserk after realizing that the white ball had been taken away for nothing. Its bloodshot eyes turned even redder as it roared angrily. Its two pairs of scythe-like incisors were suffused with extreme anger and killing intent. It didn't care about revenge. It didn't care about the lives of the other black mice. However, it couldn't lose this white ball. All of its reliance, all of its opportunities, all of it depended on this white ball. Shu chased after Silin like a madman. With every step it took, its long and sharp claws would lift up a large chunk of the cave's stone stratum. Shu didn't even turn. It simply chose the shortest distance to pursue Silin in a straight line. Its impatience was evident. Many parts of the cave had been destroyed. As Shu and Silin ran, the path they took gradually began to collapse. The path Silin had chosen didn't have any other operatives. Moreover, Shu had made a lot of noise, so the nearby operatives were on high alert. When they sensed that the cave was starting to become unstable, they quickly retreated to the surface. Silin had long since formed a clear and complete network of caves in his mind. He knew exactly when he should run to which fork in the road. The path he ran passed through most of the caves. Among them was the place where he had taken care of the hidden assassins. The cave's collapse had buried the last traces. The longer this dragged on, the weaker Shu felt after leaving the white ball. It grew more and more restless. Unfortunately, the human who had taken its things was also very fast. While running, Shu let out a long howl. It didn't sound like a rat, but more like those ancient beasts. This howl caused the entire underground network to shake. Even the operatives who were fighting the black mice on the surface could hear it clearly. It sounded like a long, mournful howl amidst the cold wind, or like the demonic voice of an Azura passing through hell. At this moment, all the operatives and researchers who heard this howl felt a cold shiver run down their spines. Just what kind of creature could make such a howl? Just what kind of situation and state of mind did this creature make such a hysterical howl? When this howl resounded, every black mouse on the surface, be it those who were fighting the operatives, those who were hiding somewhere in the base waiting for an opportunity to attack, or those who were about to drill through the last layer of defense at the center of the base, all stopped what they were doing and gathered underground. Even when the operatives fired their guns at them, they remained unmoved. Inform the operatives who haven't come up to the surface to evacuate the caves immediately. Everyone on the surface, be on high alert. Neil roared into the communicator. Although he didn't know what was going on, judging from the voice, it was obvious that the leader was coming. Somewhere inside the underground cavern, a team of operatives was moving forward. They had lost contact with the surface earlier, and their communicators had no signal at all. But seeing that the cavern was growing more and more unstable, the team leader immediately decided to leave first. Otherwise, it would be a waste to be buried here, especially after they heard that terrifying howl just now. It strengthened their decision to evacuate even more. Team leader, there's a signal. A team member cried out in joy. The closer they got to the surface and further away from the position of the black mouse leader, the more signal receivers they had installed earlier remained. It wasn't just this team. The operatives who were evacuating from the surface had also noticed that their communicators had signal. All underground operatives evacuate to the surface immediately. Evacuate to the surface immediately. Neil's voice rang from the communicator. It was filled with urgency. Retreat. The team leader immediately gave the order. But before they could take 2 steps, they felt a tremor approaching them from afar. Stay alert. All the operatives raised their guns and got ready to fire. However, everyone knew that the number of black mice wasn't something the few of them could withstand with such a loud rumble. Retreat? It was useless. His cavern was very long, and retreating now would only waste their stamina and delay the collision. They hadn't encountered such a large number of black mice when they first entered the underground cavern. Now it looked like the black mice had gathered together and charged at them, and, judging from the sound of their running, they didn't bother to conceal their movements at all. They weren't as stealthy as when they fought against them in the dark earlier. Sir was also a member of this team. Right now, he couldn't even be bothered to wipe the sweat off his forehead. He recalled everything he had experienced since he was young, his old dreams, and his ambitious arrival at Seven Lights. Did he regret it? He asked himself. He didn't know. He really didn't know. Right now, there was nothing else in his mind except for the feeling he had when he saw the golden military emblem in his dad's study when he was young. Perhaps, from that moment on, he had an obsession in his heart. One day, he would get one for himself, and the name written on it wouldn't be his dad's, but his Surd's. The black mice were already close, and the squad members could already smell the disgusting stench in the air. For glory! For glory! The squad members followed the team leader's cry and tightened their grip on their guns. Chapter 42. The squad leader had reported the situation and the names of the squad members to Juanil the moment he noticed the abnormality. Because everyone knew that Juanil was powerless to save them even if he wanted to. At the same time, similar situations were happening in other places as well. However, Surd's squad was the first to encounter the black mice returning from the surface. Juanil listened to his squad members breathing and growing louder through the communicator with an unusually heavy heart. At this moment, these people were still alive, and they could still hear their breathing. What about the next moment? The squad members around Juanil were all red-eyed, but they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't make it in time. Underground, the squad members could already see the black mice appearing at the other end of the tunnel through their night vision goggles. Ready before the squad leader could finish the word fire, a voice suddenly rang from the communicator. Squad members who encounter a large group of black mice returning from the surface, do not fire if you want to live. Move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. Be careful, do not fire. Sillen. It was Sillen. The black mice were getting closer and closer, but the squad leader hesitated. Listen to him. Do not fire. Move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. On the surface, Knight snatched the communicator from Juanil's hand and roared. The squad leader gritted his teeth. Do it. When the squad members stood close to the cave wall, the black mice were already 3 meters in front of them. They had been this close to the black mice before, but that was with weapons in their hands, not like this. When the first black mouse passed in front of them, their hearts almost jumped into their throats. The front teeth, sharp claws, blood-red eyes, and the surging stench caused the squad members' scalps to go numb. They were even prepared to die. However, the black mouse seemed to not see them at all. It was still as fast as before and swept past them with a whoosh. Then another, and another, and another. Surd felt the chilling sensation of the black mice's tough black fur brushing past him. He couldn't tell how shocked he was. This was a black mouse, a real big black mouse, a mutated black mouse that 2 shots might not even be able to kill. They could still feel the murderous aura from their bodies, but holy shit, they passed just like that. They really passed just like that. He didn't even glance at them. This was definitely the strangest and most frightening thing they had ever experienced in their lives. Only Sillen knew that the meaning of the black mice's leader's howl was for all the black mice to stop what they were doing, ignore everything else, and surround Sillen with all their might. As long as they had that white ball, they would have a chance to make a comeback. On the other side of the communicator, on the ground, Juanil and the surrounding team members held their breaths as they listened to the sound of the black mice running past them. The image was on, and although the image on the other side could not be seen clearly in the darkness, the red eyes were still relatively obvious. Just looking at the communicator caused their adrenaline levels to increase and chills to run down their spines. One could imagine the feelings of those who had brushed past the black mice on the other side. After the black mice ran over, the sound of tremors also faded away. Knight heaved a sigh of relief. As expected, Sillen was no ordinary person. However, when he tried to contact Sillen again, he discovered that he couldn't reach him. With this group's example, the other groups who encountered the same situation also did the same. However, it was only when they really did it that they realized just how much courage it took. The cowardly ones would have fainted a long time ago. Inside the cave, the group's backs were almost completely drenched. They were still stuck to the wall, and their bodies were still stiff. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. When they came back to their senses, the group members felt a little strange amidst the joy of surviving a disaster. The impassioned and heroic atmosphere in front of them was instantly destroyed. It was like preparing to go to the toilet for a long time only to let out a fart which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. How complicated their mood was, how complicated. Thank goodness that kid reminded them in time. Otherwise, the group members couldn't help but shudder just thinking about it. However, if they knew that Scylla was the culprit behind the black mice's reintroduction, they would definitely snap Scylla's neck in anger. Scylla, who continued to run, did some calculations and felt that the time was almost right. He put the white ball into Jenya's ring. It might be unstable for other subspace items, but Scylla had tested it earlier and found that it was pretty stable, as expected of an item from the mysterious Fuji family of the upper tree. After putting the white ball into the ring, Scylla sprayed some medicine he had prepared on his body to remove the ointment he had deliberately smeared on his body that was hard for humans to detect. As a hunter, Scylla had done plenty of things like using scent to mislead his prey. Scylla left the big black mouse some distance behind. If the big black mouse could speak, it would definitely say, "What the F***CK, running away so fast? Who's the mouse here? This thing isn't human. This thing really isn't human." When the black mouse head followed the scent, what it saw was a cat's face painted with fluorescent liquid on the cave wall. It was smiling like a heartless cat, and there was a big meow character next to it. The scent disappeared as it moved forward. Scylla didn't know if the big black mouse could recognize the word meow, but it was obvious that it was fuming with anger. It was fine as long as it could add fuel to the fire. If it couldn't find Scylla, who had stolen the white ball, and with his cat face adding fuel to the fire, what would happen to the black mouse head in the end? The big black mouse had long since kicked the matter of taking revenge on the base's researchers to the other side of the universe. Right now, it only wanted to find that detestable human, take back the white ball, tear that human into pieces, and then stomp him into mud. The operatives in the underground cave had all retreated to the surface. What would the black mouse head do when it was so angry that it couldn't find a target to vent its anger on? It would charge out of the ground. What was there on the ground? The operatives had concentrated their firepower, and there were even armed space planes in the air. Adhering to the rule of capture the leader first, the big black mouse would become a common target the moment it went up. Moreover, without the white ball support, the big black mouse's physical strength was declining, and its body's defense had dropped by a lot. Even if its attack power was still strong, it was obviously not as threatening as before. Scylla believed that Neil could handle it. Scylla slipped to the surface through another route, avoiding the black mouse hordes that the black mouse head had summoned along the way. When he was about to reach the surface, Scylla sensed that there was a group of people nearby, so he ran in front of them through another route. He used the mouse claws he had collected to cut open his combat uniform, leaving behind many wounds. He controlled the color, viscosity, and degree of coagulation of the blood stains, making it look like he had been injured for a while. 2 vials of antiserum had been injected, and Scylla had forced his face to turn a little pale. He looked like a wounded person who had lost too much blood and was excessively exhausted. The communicator had been destroyed after the last call, so that no one could detect Scylla's position through the communicator's signal reception. After finishing his preparations and inspecting his body once more, Scylla lay down peacefully and waited for the group of people who had passed by. The development of the situation was pretty much the same as Scylla had predicted. The group of people had treated Scylla as a wounded person and even helped him back to the surface. Neil was relieved after he saw that Scylla was only injured and not in any life-threatening danger. Otherwise, how was he going to explain things to Seremo when he returned? Scylla told Neil his guess, and Neil immediately ordered everyone to get ready after he was done. They were waiting for the black mice underground to surface. At the same time, Neil thought, as expected of Sir Mo's favorite student, every prediction is accurate.